Our story begins with an introduction to the main character. She lay beaten and looked like she was about to die. She was tormented by hunger, and she still didn't understand what it was. They started beating her, and it almost came to death. This happened because she dared to steal bread. Suddenly, the girl's eyes began to cloud over on the verge of death, and memories of her past life returned to her. The last thing she remembers from her previous life is being in a plane crash. She looked at herself until she suddenly saw that she had childlike hands. There were many books around her, and suddenly one lit up in front of her. It had the title The End of Eternal Fire written on it, and inside this novel is the world she read about before her death. A higher power said that she was prepared to live a new life, and so her soul seeped into the pages of the great book. She sat there very beaten, powerless, and hungry. She didn't even know what to do. It seemed that she had been cast in the worst role imaginable, namely that of a poor beggar. The girl thought about her body, because it also had its own backstory. Memories began to appear. The person who took care of her told the girl that he allowed her to live in his possessions, but that she was not his own, and later he ordered her to leave the possessions away from his eyes. Our heroine has no idea what the plot is in this book. She thinks everything will get better because this novel has a good ending. She smelled bread, even though she made a mistake last time, and today no one will be left without bread. She just had to wait for the right moment. As soon as the shop owner was called and he turned away, the girl immediately pulled out the bread. She already thought she was lucky, and literally, a second later, the owner grabbed her, took the bread, and threw it away. A young lady saw the unfortunate child lying on the pavement in the middle of the aisle. She was incredibly beautiful. The woman bent down to the child and asked if everything was okay. She saw that the little girl had quite special features, namely pink hair and big eyes. The unknown person asked her how old she was, and the child replied with fear that she was exactly 8 years old. The blonde lady asked if the child wanted to go with her. Our heroine immediately thought that this was a slave trader who wanted to take her into slavery, so the girl was afraid to answer. Suddenly, the woman introduced herself. Her name was Violetta, and she was a countess. The child couldn't remember which 7 mana this character was from, and she couldn't think because her stomach was starting to rumble from hunger. Hearing that she was hungry, the woman said that they had a lot of delicious food at home, such as meat, freshly baked pastries, and if she didn't want to go, she would have to eat it all herself. This gave enough motivation for the child to decide to go to her immediately, because she couldn't be such a beautiful girl or a merchant. Arriving at the Fitz estate, the girl was examined by the maids. Seeing that everything was not well with her, the woman ordered a doctor to be called. Meanwhile, our heroine was delighted to be taking such a luxurious bath, because there was so much foam. The girl realized that even though the maids looked strict, it was not worth judging them by their appearance, because they were fun to be with. After the bath procedures, the child drank tea and could not believe that such good people existed. After all, she had previously lived in a city where her owner and servants had terrible personalities, and this house must have a good owner, the child thought. And it was obvious that they were not engaged in slave trade here. Looking at her dress, she realized that this was probably the best dress in her life, and it was the first time she had worn such a beautiful outfit. The maids, seeing the girl spinning and admiring herself, were delighted with her. She seemed very cute to them. Seeing the maids admiring her, her pride was shattered. Suddenly she remembered that she was still a child. That young lady could not remain helpless again, so she thought about how to provide herself with better conditions. Suddenly, the servants called her to the table because the chef had already prepared the most delicious dishes imaginable. Forgetting any pride, the girl grabbed the maid's hand and said that she really wanted to eat. At dinner, the table was bursting with food. It all looked so delicious that she just stuffed any food into her cheeks. The maid was about to stop her, and Violetta ordered her not to touch her and simply prepare a remedy for the digestive tract. Surprisingly, after the bath, the girl reminded her even more of the same person. She couldn't believe that people who were completely strangers to each other could be so similar. The maid asked if Violetta was talking about the master Adrian. The woman replied that she was talking about him, and asked if he thought the same about creativity. But this is impossible, because the younger child died immediately after birth, and that's a fact. But no matter how much she thinks about it, she thinks she's managed to find Adrian's younger sister. The woman recalled that she had recently asked to check family ties at the temple. The subordinate said that according to rumors, the illegitimate child was expelled at the request of Viscount Beryl. It seems that his mother simply wanted money. She found this strange because the Viscount had light blue eyes. Now the girl understood that Adriana's sister was not dead. 6 years ago, around the same time, a child was born into the Viscount's family, and it is necessary to find out whether the deceased child had pink locks and blue eyes. The lady ordered to find out about the woman who gave birth to a child for Beryl and how much money she received for it. Meanwhile, the Count and his wife announced that they had almost finished sorting out the affairs of the estate and would be returning to the mansion in about the next week. Violetta wanted to sort out this matter because she knew how difficult it was for Adrian's family. Our heroine, meanwhile, had eaten enough and immediately went to bed. The woman pulled out a single hair from the sleeping girl's head so that tomorrow she could take Adrian's hair and turn to the temple. As soon as the girl woke up, Violetta was next to her. At first, our heroine couldn't understand who it was, but then she remembered that it was the same good aunt who had fed her yesterday. The child started crying because she thought she had become a slave, but the woman just started laughing because it was illegal. She hugged the child and said that she hadn't even thought about it. As soon as the child felt the hug, her impression of the woman completely changed. Meanwhile, Violetta said that they would go on a trip together because today they were visiting the house of her close friend, Adrian Esten. For some reason, a memory flashed through our girl's mind, as if she knew it. It seemed to her that the hero in the novel had the same name. But that book has a bad ending. Everything has reached our heroine. She is the same girl with pink hair who lived in the slums. Understanding this situation, the girl covered herself with a blanket and began to be very afraid. Violetta calmed the child down. At breakfast, the girl was worried that all the food and this luxury was not hers yet if she did something wrong. The lady said that all the food here was just for her, and the child thought that Violetta was like an angel. She still couldn't believe that this whole meeting wasn't a dream. It was amazing, and her new life was no longer hell, but beautiful like a field of flowers. Suddenly, the child had a dream at night, as if an unknown man was knocking the fork with meat out of the hostess's hands and saying that this dish would soon end. Even though a woman is in a child's body, she understands that something needs to be done, even though she only has enough strength to eat and sleep. She wanted to reassure herself, even by thinking that it wasn't in the novel and that it was all an illusion. Suddenly, she saw a toy. It was a teddy bear, which seemed very familiar. Suddenly, he moved. He told me that in a dream, the girl held him in her arms and the seal was removed. She didn't want to believe it, and the bear replied that everything was possible because he was a spirit with special powers. But the child didn't want to hear anything. She just threw the teddy bear away and started running away. Hearing a strange noise, Violetta came, and the child rushed into her arms. The woman asked if the child had had a nightmare and added that everything would be fine. Our heroine felt incredibly comfortable in the woman's hands, as they were magical. She fell asleep immediately from so much affection and warmth from the woman. Violetta saw how much the child was crying. She was not at all like other children. While our heroine slept, the woman admired her and could not believe that the cub looked so much like Adrian Esten. A man entered the child's room with a letter containing the results of the biological connection. As soon as the woman opened it and read it, she learned that the possibility of family ties was almost 100%. The mansion in which the child lives is owned by the Duke of Esten. He is a representative of one of the richest families in the Ferdin Empire. The child woke up again and still couldn't understand why she was in this place, while Violetta asked her how she slept and offered her to hug the teddy bear. Even though our heroine had a whirlwind of different thoughts and emotions in her head, she pulled herself together and said that she liked everything. After thinking about it a little, if it had been the same bad novel, Violetta would never have given her that teddy bear. The woman said that the girl would be going home soon. Meanwhile, the butler entered and said that the Duke and Duchess of Esten had arrived. The worried parents ran into the room. They couldn't believe it was their child. The woman added confirmation from the temple that the child and Adrian were having a tentative relationship. From the conversation, our heroine learns that she was the daughter of a duke. Although the child's parents believed Violetta, she wanted to double-check and ordered the butler to make another inquiry at the temple. Suddenly, the duke's wife fell to her feet. The maids didn't have time to catch her, and she fell to the ground. No one could understand what was happening. Meanwhile, our heroine realized that she was in a novel that had a crazy bloody ending that she most likely would not be able to avoid. The novel she is currently in is called The End of Eternal Flame. The main character in this story is Violetta Fitz, and the hero is the crown prince of the empire, Zircon Ferden. Adrian Eston flaunted himself in front of her in the future. He would become the prince's assistant. As children, Violetta and Zircon promised each other to marry, but because the love was one-sided, Adrian ends his life by suicide without finding out that she was actually hiding this marriage behind her back. In the end, the characters die, and from the title of the novel, you can see that when the fire goes out, it's not a bloody end for everyone. Our heroine knew that this story had a terrible ending. She begged that everything would somehow work out on its own. Meanwhile, Adrian thought the child was an angel, although at that moment he had a lot of questions in his head. The next morning, His Majesty was drinking tea, and Violetta was sitting opposite him, from whom the child did not want to let go. She thought for so long that she even managed to get hungry. At that moment, representatives of the temple arrived, and again the test showed that they were almost 100% biological relatives. Now that the couple was sure, they couldn't believe that the child was theirs. Meanwhile, a temple representative said that the couple could ask for help at any time, as they were the ones who donated a large amount of money to their activities. He wanted to leave quickly, so he wouldn't be overloaded with work. But Violetta said he had something to do. The little girl had been beaten quite badly, and some of the wounds were still not healed, and it would take much longer for them to heal naturally. Violetta asked to examine the child again. The temple representative had nowhere to go, so he began the examination and healing process. The girl's parents were shocked by how badly she had been hurt, and wondered who had beaten her so badly. Meanwhile, the sorcerer's hands were working real magic. All the bruises and injuries on the girl's body simply disappeared. After this procedure, the child immediately fell into a deep sleep. Adrian put the child to bed and went to Violetta. He wanted to know exactly what had happened, especially since he had no idea how the girl had survived in the slums on her own. Suddenly, the mother remembered that her maid Rosalie had given their child to Viscount Beryl for money. The couple thanked Violetta because it was only thanks to her that they were reunited with their little girl. Finally, at this point, we can learn the name of the main character, because Vicon never addressed her by name. The girl's name was Rafina. The woman thought it was a beautiful name. Meanwhile, our heroine thought long and hard about what she needed to do, because a terrible end was almost inevitable, even though she really wanted it. The little bear asked what she was worried about, and added, if she wanted to listen to a fairy tale. But Rafini wasn't up to it. She was thinking about how to live her life and move on. Suddenly, a strange idea came to her head. The plot had already taken a different turn, because in the original, Violetta never gave anyone a teddy bear, and she was sure of it. And based on this information, perhaps the person who is to blame for the bad ending will be able to independently prevent all these terrible deaths. If the ark survives, the kingdom will not fall, and there will be no mass death. The bear still managed to interrupt the girl's thoughts. He wanted to know who was bothering him, but the child knew that, even though he was deprived of reason in his usual form, he became a huge, terrible wild bear for whom there was nothing terrible in tearing a person to pieces. The only downside to this killing machine is that it's incredibly stupid. Suddenly, the bear said that she was underestimating him because he was a deity himself, and he knew all the secrets of the creation of the world. And besides, he knew about the girl's plans to change the future. He wants Rafina to share everything with him, because he really wants to help, even though in the original, he is stupid and yet has incredible abilities. Rafina decided to tell everyone she knows about the history of this world. But after hearing her words, he started talking complete nonsense. But our heroine only needed one answer. Is it possible to change the future? The bear crossed his arms and calmly replied that it was quite possible. In the original, Zircon and Violetta bind themselves in marriage, causing Adrian to die of grief. The solution is absolutely simple. Force Zircon to marry someone else right now. The idea was still a good one, but the bear didn't think about the fact that the boy was too young for it. But the pink bear didn't seem to mind because he could get engaged to someone now and have the wedding later when he was older. Rafina couldn't imagine who Zircon could be engaged to, but the bear replied that it was she who wanted to change the future, so everything now depends on her. Jirkan was the main character. His mother died of an incurable disease, and Adrian left him, but he was so deeply affected by grief that he clung to Violetta, the main character, as if possessed, and this ultimately caused her death. The young lady began to worry, thinking that because of this, the main character would become just as attached to her as to the main character. But the bear had his own vision for this. He said that the solution to the whole problem was extremely simple, because you just need to prevent the main character's mother from dying. For Rafina, this task seemed impossible, but even here, her plush friend knew a good way out. If the child can get the legendary jewel, then any disease can be cured. Besides, the bear knew where to look for her. So far, our heroine wasn't entirely sure about all this, and based on her friend's words, if it's all true, she'll be able to stop all this madness. Suddenly, Rafina was so passionate about saving the whole world that she began to imagine in her mind how to cancel the engagement of Jirkan and Violetta and create a new alliance. Then she wanted her older brother to marry her and make everyone happy. To Medvedik, it all seemed a little wild. Finally, the girl decided to ask her new friend what his name was. He introduced himself as Alexander Rubius Fernand Valloni. Since this name was too long for her, she simply decided to call him Medvedik. Alexander very angry because it was an extremely childish nickname. He started hitting the girl with his plush paws so she wouldn't be able to remember his name completely anyway. Avestienne visited the heroine's room. Rafina decided to pretend to be asleep and hugged the teddy bear and tried to fall asleep. Her father stroked her hair and couldn't even imagine how hard it was for her to live without them. He believed that it was all his fault. But still, the main thing is that she is with them again, and Rafina is a strong child, so she will quickly get used to everything and will not worry. The couple thanked Violet for finding their child. Suddenly, the girl's hair was touched by an unknown person from behind, and it was Adrian. Violetta was about to leave, but suddenly the child stopped pretending and abruptly getting out of bed asked the girl to go away. Rafina, with tears in her eyes, hugged the girl and asked her not to leave, while the heroine couldn't understand why she started crying because she just wanted to ask her to stay. Most likely because she is in a child's body, she really goes crazy and reacts to everything like a child. While at the meal, the girl again ate everything she could see. Everyone around her looked at her like she was wild, but they still understood her because she had been in the slums for a long time and lived incredibly poorly. Violetta was only happy to feed the child and asked him to chew everything carefully because it could hurt. Rafina's mother burst into tears after seeing the picture because her beloved child had been starving for a very long time. Meanwhile, the Duke asked the butler to find out exactly how Rafina lived in the house of Viscount Beryl. While bathing the girl, Violetta showed her a cute creature that she had made herself our heroine, was surprised at how talented this woman was. Even taking a bath with her was a lot of fun. After the bath, Violetta dressed the girl and said that from now on, she would live with her family. But the word family was something unknown to the heroine, because in her past life, every day was a living hell for her. She ran away from her family because of money and eventually died in a plane crash. Since those people brought her so much suffering, she decided that she would never be able to find a loving family again. Suddenly, Adrian stood over the girl and introduced himself as her older brother. He leaned against her crib and thanked her for coming back, because he loved his little sister very much. From now on, her family members treated her only with tenderness, and she didn't know if she would be able to afford to enjoy this happiness. She slept in the same bed as her mother and was not in the mood for sleep because first she had to prevent Adrian's death. Suddenly, Rafina caught herself thinking that she could never even imagine that she would ever have a real family and be able to call someone her mother. The bear added that if the girl called the Duchess, that she would be very happy. The young lady asked the bear if he was awake, and he told her not to call him that because his name was Alexander, and asked him to sleep. Being in such warm and pleasant embrace of her mother from behind, she didn't want it to ever end. She promised herself that from now on she would definitely have to prevent a bad ending. The Duchess no longer cried every time she saw Rafina, nor did Rafina herself. But when her father asked to hug him, our heroine seemed to be her worst enemy, so he was constantly asked not to be present while his daughter was in the room. The young lady could not forget the person who had wronged her so much. Namely, the window. He constantly beat her and stomped on her hands, and because of this, she could not stop thinking about it. Suddenly, Adrian interrupted her thoughts. He handed her a sweet caramel heart and asked if she wanted a snack. She instantly snatched the sweets from her brother's hands. But after that, she invited Adrian and Violetta to go with her, and they went to the garden. Meanwhile, the Duke thought about the reason for his daughter's fears. Most likely, she was very afraid of adult men. The man's thoughts were intertwined and incredibly scary. He didn't even want to imagine what his child had to go through. Besides, she's so small and fragile. Her little arms and legs are so thin and all bruised. He promised that Beryl would pay for everything, and that because he made his daughter suffer, he would destroy him. Watching the interaction between Adrian and the young lady was like watching a scene from a romantic movie. Meanwhile, Alexander. He asked if the main problem was Zirkan. The girl agreed with him, but she still didn't understand why they got married. The birth of the king's second son became a threat to Zirkan because he occupied the position of heir to the throne, and he was also pressured by relatives who were in the royal council. The woman he chose was Violetta. There was no love between them. His goal was to retain the throne. But in the end, all this led to Violet confessing her sincere feelings only after Adrian's death, which made our heroine very sad. If Rafina gets engaged to the young heir to the throne, none of this will happen. But there was one problem, because no one would take a child's words about the engagement seriously, even though he is also a child. It was necessary to immediately get Zirkan's promise to take her as his wife. And when the question of marriage arose, he would immediately remember her. The bear's decision seemed ideal. The girl, after thinking a little, complimented Alexander, because he wasn't as stupid as she thought. Meanwhile, Adrian fed her. He took care of her in every way, and the child was happy to eat anything they gave her. Suddenly, the twins asked their older brother if he would feed them the same way. But Rafina ordered them to go away because they were not supposed to do that. The brother asked her what she wanted to eat first. The little girl replied that she wanted cake. We had twins, and she ate the whole cake just from being incredibly hungry. The mother was pleased and looked at her beautiful daughter because she had to go through so much, and now she hopes that her days will be filled with only happy moments. Violetta was already getting ready to leave. Rafina's parents had prepared a carriage for this. They didn't even know how to thank her. They asked to leave a little more, and the girl said that she was already indebted to them. Still, our heroine's mother wanted to repay her somehow, and Violetta refused any offers because she was infinitely grateful to them. Our little heroine ran out to say goodbye, hugging the girl tightly and not wanting to let her go. But Vedic replied that now she has a loving family, and they will always be there for her. They are her family. After thinking a little, Rafina replied that the girl should still arrive tomorrow. The lady promised to come to her the next day, amazingly, but just one word, family, can bring an incredible amount of warmth to a child. As she said goodbye, she thought about the words of her savior. Now the child's mind was left with the last key detail that she had to do. The girl ordered her older brother to hurry up and take Violetta away, before it was too late, because she shouldn't go alone, which is why the child asked her to come tomorrow. Adrian told his parents that he would take Violetta and return immediately. Mom suggested that Rafina live together and that a private room would be prepared for her next week. The girl returned and asked if she had heard anything. Her mother replied that it was all true, but she would still sleep with her for a while. She asked if the child would mind. The girl, throwing the towel off her head, waved and said that she didn't mind at all, because then all the attention would be hers. Suddenly, the young lady remembered the advice from her teddy friend to call her mom, and then she would be happy. The child hugged his mother tightly and left Alexander. He was angry because he wanted to be called by his name. Knocked on the door. He wanted to play with his little sister before she went to bed. Rafina was scared because she thought it was her father who came in, but it wasn't him. Adrian gave her a new toy, and even though newborn babies play with it, she was still delighted with it. The twins also really wanted to play with her, and offered to play with dolls and read fairy tales. Suddenly, Rafina asked her older brother if he had seen Violetta off, because she knew he liked her. According to the plot, her older brother loved Violetta since childhood, and she found it very sentimental. While her brother was praising Violetta, the girl said that it would be great if they all lived together. Suddenly, while in her mother's arms, she shouted out loud that she wanted Violetta to marry her little brother. They were all very surprised, and Adrian was delighted because the girl called him little brother. But the plan didn't work. The boy only heard what he wanted to hear. The bear lay on its side, and said that it was a complete failure, as it turned out that getting a couple together would be much more difficult than it seemed at first. Rafina thought that if nothing good comes of it with her brother, then she should resort to a backup plan, namely seducing Zircon. The girl asked Violetta when exactly her little brother would arrive, and the twins got angry, because only they could call him that. A girl just got out of the carriage. Our heroine and her brother met her. The girl, as always, hugged Violetta tightly. She was very happy that she had arrived. As expected, she arrived without Zircon. A good decision was to go with Violetta and wait for the future heir to the throne. Although her brother didn't understand why the girl wasn't having a good time at home, she still did it all for their good. Our heroine asked Violetta if she was friends with anyone else. Besides Adrian, as expected, she had a good friend named Zircon, and he was the crown prince of the entire kingdom. Rafina asked to tell me more about him, and pretended that she was incredibly interested. The lady said that the heir to the throne was incredibly popular, and although the girl didn't want to admit it, he was really very handsome. Suddenly, the girl immediately asked if Violetta thought he was more handsome than Adrian, and the lady slyly replied that they were both on par. The girl found it strange that the little boy was so interested in her friend, but she still found it incredibly sweet that he wanted to learn more about her. Rafina added that she wants to meet all of Violetta's friends. The girl thought it was incredibly sweet and promised to come the next day with Zircon. Meanwhile, the Duke tried in every way to please his daughter. He treated her to incredibly delicious treats, and the girl could not resist them. The maids saw that the young lady's heart was not in front of her father, and her mother was happy because she had always been afraid of her father, and in the end, she was still able to open her heart to him. Recently, her father no longer seemed scary and intimidating, and there really is a family connection between them. Thanks to her, the Duke and Duchess became very close and looked incredibly happy. The girl wanted to preserve all this well-being. Suddenly, the twins ran up from behind. They asked if Rafina wanted to play hide-and-seek, adding that it would be incredibly fun. The girl agreed only on the condition that the one who was looking for her would count to 100. But they asked her not to go far because they were worried about her. Although the main character's life was getting bigger, she still continued to behave like a child, and it really bothered her. She ran as fast as she could to hide. When she saw the column, she thought it was a great place to hide. Behind it stood an unknown red-haired man. The girl was very scared and thought it was a monster, but the unknown person asked her not to be scared and introduced himself as Rendell, her personal knight. He was ordered to follow her during the game, but still the girl was playing hide-and-seek and she had to hide. The young man suggested hiding at home because it was quite dangerous from the outside, and our heroine didn't like it. She couldn't stand it and pushed the guy away, running away from him, because hide-and-seek is a war, and you can't just lose in it. The girl was running so hard that she didn't even notice when she bumped into the black-haired young man. It was Durkan Ferdin. He couldn't be confused with anyone else. He was the one she needed. He was truly incredibly handsome. She couldn't even imagine what he would be like when he grew up. Just then, Violetta came up. She picked up the girl in her arms and asked how she had fallen. Suddenly, she saw that there was an awkward pause between the children, so she decided to introduce them to each other. Rafina was confused because she didn't know what to say to him now. I quickly thought about whether she had decided to blurt out something that she wanted to marry him. She hesitated for a long time, but still took the young prince by the sleeve and said, "Let's get married." For some reason, he is silent, looking at her with his beautiful eyes, still without saying a single word. The girl took this as a rejection. But Rafina must make a verbal agreement with him, and has 2 more years to do so before the main character goes to the academy. Suddenly, after a long silence, Zircon agreed, and there was an incredible amount of joy on the girl's face. Violetta thought it was very cute and started kissing our heroine. Violetta liked it so much that she started joking, as if she should start getting jealous and wondering if the little girl wanted to marry her. Rafina burst into tears because she knew that Violetta should belong to her brother. She knew exactly who the girl would fall in love with. The fear that her little brother would die completely alone terrified her. She couldn't let it happen. She ran up and took Zircon's hand, saying that she must marry him. The guy smiled and looked very embarrassed. He was so handsome that he blinded the girl with his beauty. The young lady thought that her plan had already come true, and it turned out that she had figured everything out. Suddenly, Adrian approached them, and when he saw that the girl was in the boy's arms, He immediately took her off and covered her with his. He said there was a misunderstanding, and most likely his sister was mistaken. And the beautiful brother, with the most frequent soul, the main character's assistant, he simply cannot have such a frightening expression on his face. Unexpectedly, the knight picked up Rafina. The heir to the throne told Adriano that his sister wanted to marry him, but her brother said that these were just empty childish words because she had only recently turned 6 years old. He did not think that one could believe the words spoken by a child. Aggression was growing rapidly between the two boys. The tension was visible even in the air. Violetta and everyone present saw Adrian react so sharply for the first time. The girl decided to calm the boy down and hugged him, saying that he shouldn't worry so much, and she also added that when it comes to his sister, he becomes very serious. After thinking about his behavior a little, Adrian realized that he had gotten all the more heated, especially since Rafina, although young, was still a lady. Our heroine's parents couldn't believe that the girl would say such nonsense to the heir to the throne himself. They began to apologize profusely to him and told him that she had just returned home, so most likely it was just child's play. But the heir to the throne had a gift for her, and he hoped she would accept it. In the novel, Zircon had a connection with the gods. Although he was an ordinary person, the only spirit he could control was the water spirit sealed in a bracelet. The girl was very scared when she saw him. The young prince said that Her Majesty the Queen asked him to give this bracelet as a gift, and he simply delivered it to the recipient. All this seemed very strange to the girl, because according to the plot of the novel, in a few years, the bracelet should fall into the hands of Violet and then release its magical powers. Violetta gave her a teddy bear, and the spirit inside was released. But spirits sealed in objects don't just wake up. Whether or not to reveal themselves is their personal choice, and it turns out that the magical items themselves chose our heroine. Only a person who is a bearer of magic can possess such things. If the spirit rejects the owner, it will remain sealed in the object forever. It turns out that the bear chose the girl himself. Suddenly, her mother took the bracelet and showed it to the girl, adding that it was a gift from the royal family and suggesting that she wear it. The bracelet was too big for her, but after wrapping it around her arm twice, it still secured itself. The girl was afraid that the spirit would wake up right now. It seems that this spirit has given up on her. Our heroine has become much lighter in spirit, while the bear has added that one of them will be enough, and that later she will need to return the bracelet to Zircane. Our heroine's mother was very happy for her. She asked if she liked the bracelet, and she added that it suits her very well. The young lady reluctantly said that she liked everything as long as her mother was happy. The girl didn't know what to do and whether she should go to the queen and tell her everything about the spirit, because it was all for the sake of a happy ending. As soon as the heir to the throne smiled, he lit up the entire room. He was incredibly beautiful. The children around him asked his opinion about marrying Rafina, and he was not against it. Hearing all this, the girl looked very sad. Looking at Zircon, she seemed to sense his loneliness, a feeling as if he already knew what would happen to him in the future. He is laughing heartily now, and in a couple of years, he will almost completely go crazy. Would work out for her, and once that happened, she would no longer have any worries. Medvedik hugged the girl and said that he didn't choose her for nothing, and suggested that she think better about how to win Zircon's heart. Rafina ate and thought about the heir to the throne's family, his mother, the queen. She was curious to learn more about his relatives, about the king, queen, and younger brother. It is these people who will become the cause of Zircon's madness. Alexander said the relationship between the brothers is not very good, although it cannot be good. The bear smiled wickedly and said that it was to their advantage, because then it would be much easier to get close to him. He asked her to remember how stupid Adrian had acted because of her, and that she should do the same stupid thing with the mirror so that he would guard it just as jealously. If this method works, she will be able to stop the engagement of Zircon and Violetta. The main question is what it takes to win the heart of the heir to the throne. The bear laughed and told the girl not to worry, because he had one surefire option. She barely managed to gather all her willpower and come to visit the boy, but he was nowhere to be seen. The servant said he had gone to the libraries. She was also very annoyed Rendell, who accompanied her everywhere. While searching for the boy, the girl became very angry and suddenly saw him sitting on the windowsill holding some kind of book in his hands. Without thinking twice, she approached him, and the guy immediately greeted her. The girl was delighted with him, as always. For a moment she thought and realized that this was a chance to start a conversation with him, flirted with him a little, but still understood what needed to be done. So she asked him if he wanted to marry her. The young man laughed, although the girl was not upset, and remained strong even when it was hard. She believed that she should propose to him every time they met. Suddenly, her older brother and Violetta caught the two of them in the library. Zirkan decided to make fun of Adrian a little, and replied that he was ready to become Rafina's husband. He looked at Adrian and wondered what to do, and whether his sister would really become the wife of the heir to the throne. But the mockery didn't last long. He stopped being serious and laughed at the way Adrian looked. But the girl didn't know how to react to this, so to seal the deal, she took the guy's hand and asked him to come tomorrow. And he agreed. She thanked him and kissed his hand because physical contact is the best method for getting closer. The girl stuck to the plan, and suddenly, the spirit that was in her bracelet that Zirkan had brought woke up. An unknown force spoke from the bracelet. It said that it had been waiting for this for many years, and thanks to it, it had awakened. The Countess did not want to hear this. She asked him not to wake up and to return. Medvedik recognized the spirit from the bracelet. It was Orphan, the spirit of water. In the original novel, Zirkan hated him, even though he was usually kind and sweet. But he had one negative side. He was a terrible swearer. Compared to him, Zirkan is a pure angel. The girl couldn't listen to all this swearing, so she covered her ears. The bear also began to respond to the bracelet. The orphan asked to throw the bear away, but the girl calmed down and ordered the two to be quiet. Suddenly, she felt very sleepy. She fit comfortably between her two parents and immediately fell asleep, especially since living in a child's body is very difficult because she quickly wants to sleep. The maid Selena saw Rafina, and she thought the girl was incredibly cute and similar to a bee. She had a rather strange view of the world, but the dress was really pretty. She was awakened by a strange force. Surprisingly, last night wasn't a dream after all, although she would have been very happy if it had all just been a dream. The maid overheard the girl talking to the teddy bear and asked what exactly she was saying. Rafina panicked and said that she was just talking to the teddy bear. The maid didn't find it strange, but even cute because she was just a child. The woman added that if the girl needed anything, she should definitely call her. Meanwhile, Rafina argued with Orphan because he was supposed to be the spirit of Zirkan, and not her, but he said that he chose her and promised to behave well. The orphan begged not to chase him away, but the bear wanted to break him, and the spirits quarreled again. The girl ordered the two to be quiet. She grabbed her head and didn't know what to do. Although if you think about it, the bracelet can't be broken just like that. And besides, it's a gift from the queen, so you can't throw it away. The girl asked the bracelet to be as quiet as possible. He agreed and said that he completely understood her. Suddenly, the maid noticed that the girl was having a rather interesting conversation, and she also wanted to tell something. She prepared a small gift for her. It was a bow for a teddy bear. If you tie it correctly, it turns out a backpack, and now she and Alexander will always be able to spend time together. Even the bear liked it, and in this form, the girl definitely looked like a child. Adrian asked Rafina if she wanted to go for a walk since the weather was beautiful. He also said that she was like a little bee, just like the maid said. The parents went on business, and the twins have classes with their teachers now, so today they will be alone with their older brother all day. This seemed wonderful, because it was still waiting for Zirkan. And besides, the girl had a cunning plan to talk to him about Violetta. Walking around the yard, she asked Adrian if he liked the girl, and he calmly replied that he did very much so. He himself started a conversation about it, and said that she smelled good, and had a very gentle and affectionate voice. He added that it would be great if Violetta lived with them. The girl didn't hesitate for long, and shouted that she wanted to become part of their family. Suddenly, the guy asked his sister if she felt the same way about Zirkan. He was curious why Rafina loved mirrors so much. The girl blushed because of it, then added that she liked Violetta, which is why she liked him. Although he didn't have the best character, she still mentally understood that she had to change the future. Adrian said that even if the girl really likes His Majesty, it doesn't mean that she should talk about the wedding. And besides, she doesn't really know what marriage is. Suddenly, Rafina replied that their parents were also married, but he replied that it was different because they were adults and she was still young. In response, the girl screamed and said that as soon as she grew up, she would immediately marry Zerkain. Rafina began to get very nervous because her brother didn't understand why she was doing all this, even though he couldn't possibly know about it, and she was acting only for his sake and for the good of the entire kingdom. The girl started yelling at her brother and said that life is hard, and sometimes she throws up difficult problems that need to be solved. She said that he didn't have to worry about anything and that she would definitely protect him. Although Adrian didn't understand what she was talking about, it seemed to him that his sister was better off with a mirror than with him. Although it was impossible to even describe in words what he felt when he first heard about his sister's desire to marry Zerkan, in his mind he felt that Rafina saw Zerkan as 100 times better than him, although there was probably nothing to worry about because his father would not allow it. He thought that as soon as she grew up, she would immediately forget about this situation, and to begin with, he just needed to get closer to her. Adrian added that the girl's room was almost ready, so he wanted to go and look at it together. Rafina saw that her brother was worried about her, but she felt much more comfortable with him than with Violetta or Jerkan. It was unclear why the girl's heart started beating so fast. Memories flooded her mind from her previous home, where she was placed in a tiny room with nothing. For her, the hope of a better life was a luxury, and now, as soon as she entered the room, she was almost blinded by how spacious and beautiful it was. It was the first time she had seen such a luxurious interior. It smelled incredibly nice, and she was simply incredibly big. Her brother and the nurse were pleased that everything suited the girl. In a past life, the girl could not even imagine such a room, but here she will live. She calmed down, and her brother thought she was a Melra, and they laughed a little. Adrian said she could use this room until she was older, but after the wedding, she wouldn't need it anymore. But the girl was somehow indifferent. She just lay down on the bed and couldn't even put into words how wonderful this place was. The poor little room once more, and suddenly her brother stroked her. He sat down on her bed and asked her if she liked everything. The Countess liked Adrian. It was very gentle and pleasant for Gladova. She would like it to continue forever. Now she is absolutely sure that she will protect Adrian at any cost. Meanwhile, the butler came and notified him that his friend was coming. The guy was scared, and the girl didn't understand who could have come. The first guy thought about Zerkin. But then I remembered that he was incredibly busy and wouldn't be able to visit even if he really wanted to. Although he didn't know who had arrived, his soul was very restless. Unexpectedly, the heir to the king himself entered the room and greeted Adrian and Rafina, and the older brother asked why he was here. Zerkin simply forgot to remind him that he would be arriving today, but he promised Rafina about it. Adrian was very angry about this. He put his sister behind him and did not want to let the guy near her. But Zerkan said that he really promised her that he would come. There was a look of misunderstanding on the guy's face. Out of nerves, Adrian squeezed his sister's hand so hard that it hurt. He immediately began apologizing to her because he didn't want to cause her pain. A moment later, the girl ran to Zerkin's arms. Adrian was simply stunned by this turn of events. Despair was visible on his face. Meanwhile, the happy girl did not forget to remind the star-crossed love that they should get married. The heir to the throne said it was a rather warm meeting and apologized to her older brother. Adriano had no choice but to simply remain silent. Zerkan stroked the girl's head and said that he wouldn't be able to stay long because he had many other things to do. But still, Rafina was satisfied because he had fulfilled his promise. She immediately led him to her room to show him how luxurious it was. The girl noticed that it was incredibly large. Then the guest smiled and asked if she was sure she could sleep here alone. With confidence on her face, the girl assured that she would be able to, because she was already an adult and would not be scared by any honey growths. She added that the more cheerful the room, the merrier. Zorkan incredibly wanted to stay in it longer because Rafina seemed very nice to him. When he saw his brothers, he didn't have such thoughts, although his half-brother was still the worst of them all. But Rafina was completely different. She was small, tender, and fragile. Her voice was so beautiful that when she called him by name, his soul became warmer. Zerkan apologized to her older brother and justified himself by saying that she herself would ask him to marry her at the first opportunity. He noticed that Rafina really liked her room, and the girl simply agreed with it, not noticing how childish she was acting again. She forced herself to pull herself together because they left her with one more thing. She asked when to expect him next time to see him. But the young man said that at the moment it is difficult for him to answer this question because he usually does not have time for such things. So Violetta and Adrian always come to the capital themselves. The girl was sad, and suddenly a wonderful idea appeared in her head. She couldn't understand why she hadn't thought of it before. She needed to meet the mother of the crown prince. The girl promised that next time she would come to him herself. In her mind, she understood that the mirror's mother could not die, and if she could deal with this problem as soon as possible, the main reason for the crown prince's madness would pass. The boy smiled and said he would wait for her, fell silent, and sat down on the sofa. Today had been a difficult day. Before leaving, Zirkin promised her to meet again, which is a great job because making a marriage proposal is not that easy. But another problem arose this time with her brother Adrian. He was sitting there upset. It was not easy when a friend tries to take your younger sister away from you. You can understand him. His long-lost sister has just returned to her parents' home, and all her attention is focused only on strangers. She decided to fix this problem, so she immediately suggested we eat together, because there is no more suitable weapon in the fight against sadness than something sweet. The guy was surprised that the girl took the initiative and offered him a cake. She added that this was a cake for her favorite little brother. The guy directly asked if she loved Zirkin more than him, and then our heroine realized that Adrian was still quite a child. I'm really surprised that he behaves like an angel in such cases. Rafina said that this was not true at all because she loved him the most. A smile immediately appeared on the boy's face, but the girl added that she would marry the mirror anyway. She also ordered that he must marry Violetta because she wanted to live with her. Besides, if Adrian and Violetta are the first to tie the knot, she won't need to leave the mirror because he can simply marry someone else. For our heroine, this seems like the best way out of the situation, because in the original, he only needed the marriage formally. She decided that she would marry for love. Meanwhile, the Duke caught his daughter's abuser. He wondered if he understood why he was here. The Viscount repented and did not know that the cursed woman had replaced the child. The Duke would not listen to him and grabbed him by the shirt, asking how he dared to hit his child with his disgusting hands. The man was sure that Beryl had knowingly committed the crime, even if it was not his child. He couldn't understand how anyone could treat a defenseless child like that. The man's words sounded as if he himself were ready to abuse his own child like that. But he replied that it was all true because it made no difference to him whether he beat his own child or someone else's. In any case, he would starve him to death or beat him to death. The Duke of Eston could not listen to such terrible words. He hit him on the leg with all his strength. He promised that as soon as he got out, he would immediately report that he was the head of the Assassin's Guild. The Duke's subordinates said that the man was worthless trash, and that if he survived, it would only get worse for him. The Duke said that Beryl didn't understand the difference between their guild and any other, because they only dealt with bad people just as terrible as him. The man began to list what he was involved in: gambling, human trafficking, and other terrible things that Viken did. He had already been ordered 5 times. The offender was simply shocked by what he heard. He could not accept it. The Duke said that it was better for him to give up hope of survival and simply wait for death. He ordered his killers to finish the job and left himself despite the freak's pleas. The next morning, the girl woke up and couldn't find her teddy bear even though she had slept with him in her arms. There was nothing you could do, you had to summon another spirit. She called Orphan, and he immediately jumped into her arms. The orphan couldn't believe that the girl had called him. The young lady asked the spirit to calm down and behave quietly. She ordered him to tell her where the ruby had gone. The spirit said that one of the maids took him. While she was fast asleep, the woman took the teddy bear to wash. He begged for help, and she slept so sweetly that Orphan ordered him to shut his mouth. Realizing what had happened, the girl immediately called Selena. The teddy bear was hanging among the other clothes. Rafina quickly took him off and listened to how the horrible maid treated him. First, she tied him up, and then she started beating him. He suffered terrible torment. The girl just apologized for not being able to help, but now it's very clean and smells delicious. Lady noticed that the bear could use Orphan's power to wash himself, but Alexander did not want to come into contact with the water spirit. Suddenly, Violetta came into the room and happily greeted the girl. Rafina ran to her and hugged her simultaneously, burying her reputation as a dear person and completely acquiring the reputation of a child. Violetta asked if the girl remembered what day it was, and the thought that they would go to Zircon today popped into the girl's head. Today will go down in history. Selena did her a wonderful hairstyle, and her mom picked out a blue dress. She even has a gift for the boyfriend. Everything is absolutely perfect. Adrian was shocked when he saw his sister, because she was shining like a fairy. The girl thanked him and told her brother that he was like an angel. Violetta asked the girl's opinion of her, and Rafina replied that she was also like an angel. Over the past 5 days, Violetta and Adrian have become very close. All that's left is to tie Zircon to her, the girl thought. The day she would save the world was very near, and upon arriving at the place, she was shocked by how beautiful the palace looked. It was so majestic that she felt like she was in a movie. When she saw the statue of the king, she thought it was a bit too much. The maid brought tea and apologized for the crown prince being a little busy right now, adding that he had no more meetings scheduled at the moment, so he would join them later. Violetta called Adrian and asked him to look at Rafina. The girl was very worried. The couple thought she was so cute that they couldn't help but laugh. Our heroine did not even expect such a turn of events. Not long ago, she was eating dog food from a bowl and dressed in rags. The Viscount called her a poor unfortunate. These words still cannot get out of her head. Suddenly, the bear remembered that at any moment, he could crush the entire castle without even putting in any effort, and she asked him not to do so. Even though the fate of the entire kingdom was in her hands, she had to concentrate. The desserts looked too luxurious, and she decided to eat everything despite her conscience. It was all incredibly delicious strange, and it seemed to her that it was because she was in the castle. Suddenly, someone knocked on the door. The girl forgot to take the fork out of her mouth and turned to see who it was. It was Zircon who came. He apologized for being late. Rafina was very happy for him and wanted to run to hug him. Suddenly, the girl saw the crown prince's uncle. He was incredibly handsome. The man is happy to meet the master Eston and Mistress Fitz. He said he was an uncle and introduced himself as Eden by Rolian. The girl bowed before him and added that she was also very happy since he was Zircon's uncle, which means he was the queen's younger brother. If we go by the plot, the royal family was quite friendly until all these events that destroyed this idol. The crown prince's uncle called the girl very cute, and she didn't understand why he was so friendly. He added that he would like to introduce some more people to them. A moment later, he showed his wife. She introduced herself. Her name was Anna. The girl's breath was caught in her throat because it was because of her that the butterfly effect would appear. It was she who was the primary cause of all subsequent events. Her actions would destroy the royal family. In our heroine's opinion, she was a terrible person. The girl didn't know how to prevent all this, and nothing came to her mind. Maybe we should try to stop their wedding first, the child thought. The young lady was so lost in thought that she didn't even notice the mirror next to her, so he himself approached her and greeted her. She turned to him in fear, and he asked if anything had happened during his absence. Rafina immediately took his hand and was delighted she reminded him again that he had married her. Adrian asked Violetta if she was thinking the same thing as him. Meanwhile, our heroine wondered if there was a way to get rid of this marriage system. But in the end, you need to have two correct options at the same time, because it's not a fact that Adrian and Violet will do well. Zircon's uncle said that they were expecting them, but in the meantime, the girl saw that she needed to deal with his marriage. The man poured tea and said that he first decided to meet with His Highness the Crown Prince, and he was also told that the Queen was in the meeting room. He also introduced his bride to himself in front of the mirror and told what he had written about her in the letter. The young man's uncle noticed that the little boy was probably quite happy because he had managed to meet his future wife before the Queen herself, and the boy confirmed this. But in fact, the young man did not react to this in any way. He was completely indifferent. This surprised the girl because she had guessed that he was so indifferent but didn't know that much. Even Adrian Violetta noticed that he wasn't behaving very well and said that he was probably just tired. In any case, the girl needed to resolve the issue with the future wife of the Queen's younger brother. Rafina saw that Anna was looking straight at her. Very scared, the girl ran to hug Violetta, who didn't understand what had happened, but simply remained silent. The girl knows perfectly well what kind of person this is, which is why she doesn't want to talk to her. The bear asked what their plan was. In the original novel, he had a difficult fate. Uncle Zircon brought this girl with him on his return to the capital, but the truth is that she is carrying someone else's child. It's just that right now, while kissing her husband, she is pregnant by another man. It's strange, but at this moment, she exudes a very pure and innocent energy. It's hard to even imagine that she has another personality. But despite her modest appearance, she is very cruel. In the past, this woman worked in a shelter and regularly beat children. It's strange that she doesn't notice anything. It looks as if she has no idea about anything at all. Anna behaves in a way that is certain. If you don't know anything, you can easily be deceived. This is precisely why there is no forgiveness for the woman. She uses the people who love her for her own purposes. In the future, after giving birth to someone else's child, the Rolian woman will return to her first husband, completely robbing the queen's younger brother. What is most shocking is that this is another relative of the queen, and it is after this revealed fact that misfortune will overtake the ruling family. Rolian will be branded as an unprincipled man whose wife was taken away from him and who will not be able to return the stolen property. The queen's family will lose both prestige and pride, and the younger brother will be stripped of his title due to disgrace, and the entire family will face financial difficulties, and family members will begin to grow more and more distant from each other. All these troubles will fall on the shoulders of the queen. This is why our heroine is so afraid and despises the woman sitting right in front of her. The bear knew that after this, the queen would fall ill with an incurable disease, and the girl was obliged to help her. We can't let Jerkin go crazy. The bear had the idea to simply tell everyone in advance that this woman was pregnant. Rafina told him that it was not easy, but their dialogue was interrupted by a young couple. Rolian said he would like the woman to give birth to a lovely little sister for His Highness the Crown Prince. The lady added that she would be happy if they had a little girl. Rafina felt that she had eaten quite a lot of desserts. Meanwhile, the bear asked her to bend down because he wanted to tell her something. Alexander told some cunning idea about how to resolve the situation. An evil smile appeared on our heroine's face. The girl approached Anna and turned to her. She directly said that she would indeed have a child soon. She added that Anna was already carrying it in her belly. The woman was shocked. The bear told me that there is a legend about how children can sense if a woman is pregnant, as if when life is born in a girl's belly, other children can feel it. In this beautiful fairy tale, little angels were made to wish for a child to appear in the family, and thus people began to believe that children understand when a woman is pregnant. Some still think that way. It doesn't matter whether you believe it or not, but a belief remains a belief. Anna didn't know what to do, and the queen's younger brother also couldn't understand what she was talking about. Anna's face changed. She looked at the girl angrily, and Rafina had a great chance to take advantage of the situation and not back down. Anna wanted to turn it all into a joke, but the girl assured her that she was sure of it and that she really had a baby growing inside her. Adrian quickly grabbed his younger sister and asked her to be quiet because you can't behave like that. Anna laughed and said it was a good joke. Violetta decided to break the awkward silence and asked what date the wedding was scheduled for. Rolian said that he would tell them all over a cup of tea, while his bride asked to go to the bathroom to powder her nose. Rafina, without thinking twice, said that she would also go with her to powder her nose. The maid wanted to help, but the girl said she could handle it herself because she just wanted to wash her hands. When she entered the bathroom, she saw Anna washing her hands. The girl decided not to hesitate and again said that she had a baby growing in her stomach. She warned the young lady that if she continued to talk like that, she could get into big trouble. Anna sat down next to the girl and said that adults hate children who lie, and asked if she understood everything well, because such liars are abandoned by their parents and sent to an orphanage. She continued to tell horrible things about how liars are punished by being beaten until they turn blue or locked in a tiny room without food or water. She added that even an aristocrat from the most influential family should never tell a lie. But the bear insisted that she was safe and could pressure the woman further. Rafina smiled and said that she understood everything. Anna really had a child growing in her stomach. The woman was so angry that she already swung her hand to hit the girl. But suddenly, she said the surname Gerstan, and the woman's hand hung in the air. The angry woman couldn't understand how she knew all this and who she even was. Meanwhile, the girl's plan worked perfectly. The maid came running to the screams, and Rafina burst into tears. Before everyone finds out about Anna's pregnancy, the girl wants to reveal her rotten nature. The queen came, she was simply divine. She asked what had happened here. Everyone around started whispering. The bear reminded the girl that it was time to get ready because the queen had arrived, and this was a chance to reveal Anna's bad nature. She ran to the queen and screamed that she was in pain. Now the woman understood why there was so much noise. The fraudster could barely contain herself. She began to make excuses and say that the girl had fallen on her own. But the queen ordered them to stop talking and tell what had happened. All this noise was giving her a headache. One of the maids said that she was the daughter of the Duke of Eston, and also a guest of His Majesty the Crown Prince. She added that she was waiting for her outside the dressing room door, and suddenly heard loud noises. Even the queen noticed how beautiful the little girl was, and it seemed that she looked like a goddess. She also saw that Lord Rolian had arrived, but her thoughts were interrupted by Anna, saying that it was a great honor for her to meet the queen. The woman recognized her and said she knew her because she was Edina's fiancée. The queen took the girl in her arms and asked why she was crying. Although Rafina knew that the queen was kind and did not expect it to be so, she cherished and comforted the girl like an angel. And it became sad that such a sensitive person would die from an illness, and all because of terrible people. She couldn't let this happen. The girl added that it was Anna who got angry and pushed her, pointing her finger at her. The queen asked if this was true, and Anna began to justify herself, saying that it was all a provocation by a little girl. Rafina continued and said that Anna was very surprised because she had a baby in her stomach, which the baby told her about with joy. After a little thought, the queen understood why the young people wanted to start the wedding so quickly. Anna wanted to assure her that she was not pregnant, and the queen said that it was nothing to be ashamed of, and that things happen. For the girl, it was an absolute failure. Instead of preventing the wedding, she only contributed to it. But it was still a small benefit, because it was uncomfortable for Anya. Rafina must reveal the truth, and she asked the queen to go with her. Adon hugged the queen. He was very happy to meet her, and apologized for not being able to come earlier. He noticed that the woman had lost a lot of weight, but there was nothing he could do because the queen had a lot of worries on her shoulders. The woman pinched the boy's cheek and said he looked too happy. Everyone thought they had a pretty strange relationship, but Zircon said that everything was normal, and they always behaved so annoyingly. Her Majesty belongs to a family with little influence after coming to the throne. She naturally found herself trapped in a cage, but despite this, she was able to maintain her authority. But for power-hungry relatives, the king still remains a big problem, and the queen's power has grown precisely because of his support. Therefore, Her Majesty's family did everything possible to remove the Eastern Prince from power. That's why they did such terrible things to the mirror, and he was just a child. Rafina was very emotional, because she did not want to allow evil people to continue to abuse the children. The little bear told the girl that if she wanted, he would immediately turn into a big one and crush everyone here who didn't like her. But the lady pinched his cheek and told him not to say such disgusting things. She said she was in a child's body and added that she couldn't hear such words. But he replied that the girl considered herself an adult, which is why he suggested it. When the queen learned the news of Anna's pregnancy, she asked Eden about it, but he didn't understand what she was talking about. The woman began to fill in that there was no need to hide the pregnancy because she already knew everything, and the scammer looked tense. Rolian wanted to assure her that she was wrong, because Rafina and Anna had literally just met, so her words could be false. But the queen said that he didn't understand anything, because if a child says such things, then a child will definitely appear in the near future. The guy laughed and said that they would try. Although Rolian is stupid enough to marry Anna, he is not the kind of person who is ready to lose his honor and pride because of a woman. If Anna was confident in her actions before now, she is worried about being caught in a lie. Adrian saw that Rafina was crying again and asked what happened. The girl said she was just very scared. Anna said that she was standing behind her and accidentally scared her because she was surprised how she fell. She wanted to remove from the girl the words that it was all a coincidence. Rolian asked the bride to be more careful, adding that it was Anna's first time in the castle, so she might be clumsy. In an instant, the girl's plan fell apart because everything she planned to tell the queen had just been twisted by Rolian himself. The young lady didn't know how to tell the guy that Anna wanted to harm him. The queen invited the couple to the garden and said they would talk there, and Zircana asked to escort the guests. Frightened, the girl quickly got up from the sofa and asked the woman to wait because she wanted to tell her something. But the queen said that next time she would invite her mother, and they would feed them deliciously. The queen's beauty enchanted her. She looked incredibly kind, and after gathering her thoughts a little, the girl realized that she needed to wait a bit because it would be strange if she continued to talk about the same thing. Zerkan extended his hand to the girl and invited her to follow him, asking if she was hurt. The girl replied that it was okay. As he walked, he caught Anna's eye. She also seemed strange to him. The bear didn't know what to do now, because the role of the groom was assigned to Anna, and most likely, the wedding was just a matter of time. Rafina replied that there was nothing she could do, she needed to return to the castle with her mother. But it is unknown whether they will believe the child's words. Meanwhile, Zerkan asked the girl if she had hit herself hard by taking her hand. Adrian was shocked by this. He wanted Rafina to take his hand, rather than the Eastern prince. He already wanted to say something to Zerkan, and Violetta stopped him. The girl's older brother promised that in the future he would change the laws to allow marriage. Violetta admired the couple, they were very similar. Rafina was pleased with the result. She would constantly get closer to him until she married him. She looked to the side and saw that someone was crying. This is one of the queen's servants standing by the windowsill. The girl apologized and wanted to turn to the lady, when suddenly Violetta patted her on the head and said that most likely something bad had happened, and the maid just needed to be alone for a while. Rafina thought about it and agreed with the girl's opinion, because there was no reason to just interfere, even if it was a little unpleasant. In the end, they ended up in the library. Rafina didn't expect them to turn out to be such exemplary students, and although it was commendable, the atmosphere here was quite intimidating. Hadrian wanted to learn more about the marriage system, and Violetta was looking for books on law. Rafina thought they came here to have fun and not to study. Although sitting next to the mirror, it seemed like everything wasn't so bad. She couldn't miss the opportunity. Meanwhile, the boy offered the girl a little roast. Our heroine happily ate the gift. The young man thought about making more of her favorite snacks. Meanwhile, Rafina said that Anna had pushed her like that on purpose, even though she wasn't hurt, and she was very angry about it and started crying. Zerkan found it all strange, and perhaps the situation was not just a coincidence. He thought deeply because carrying a child under his heart before the wedding was simply a shame. In addition, she constantly looked at the little girl with a murderous look, which was quite suspicious for a bride. Looking at the girl who ate her fill of cookies, he is happy if only because she has a good appetite. Rafina told Zerkan that she had prepared a gift for him. The boy had a strange reaction. She thought he didn't like that. The young lady asked him to close his eyes to receive the gift as soon as possible. The guy smiled and closed his eyes. He asked if he was doing everything right. The girl said everything was fine and asked not to peek and to hold out her hand. Suddenly, the young man felt something strange in his hand, and when he opened it, he saw that it was a brooch with an azure stone. Such jewelry has special significance in this world because it is endowed with protective magic. Pink is usually given to a daughter and blue to a son. They are proof of parental love and symbolize support for the royal family. This is exactly what is included in a gift. And unfortunately, Zerkan never received anything like this from his father in his life. The second prince specially wore a brooch, given by the king to show off to him. Although Zerkan didn't show his true emotions, he was definitely very sad and disappointed, because in the end, he was just a child. He asked the girl if this wasn't one of those things that Duke Estienne had been making a lot of trouble about recently. The girl said that it was a special brooch, and that it contained protective magic. It looked incredibly expensive, blindingly expensive. Having apologized to her father in absentia, she still gave it to him because he would need it more. In the novel, he was supposed to be inflicted with a severe moral trauma, and this brooch was supposed to help in healing. Compared to the second prince, Zerkan is taller and much more beautiful, the girl said. The crown prince asked if this brooch belonged to Adrian, and the girl said it was a gift. She added that this way you can show a person how valuable they are to you. Zerkan believed that only parents gave azure brooches, although in reality, anyone could give something like this to their loved one. Apparently, he doesn't know the deep meaning of these things, but the girl really appreciated him a lot. She said that the most important thing was that he was safe. The girl approached him and said that this was true, and that anyone could give such a thing to a loved one. The young man smiled and replied that the girl was absolutely right. All of this made the guy shine, which is expected of the main character, but he's still the best. The girl asked him not to forget where he got this brooch from, and proudly pointed to herself and said that she was the one who gave it to him. Zircon thanked her and patted her head. Now Rafini can only comfort the boy. She also did not forget to remind him that if he is truly grateful to her, he should marry her in the future. The young man could not help laughing at what he heard. He did not understand why the girl wanted to marry him so much. He didn't understand that this was the only way to make him happy. So the girl replied that Zircon was the most beautiful in the world, and the bear asked Rafina to think again. In the novel, he is a dream for all women with an unbeatable body and appearance, and a strong will. He is literally ideal, although he has a bad character. But the girl wouldn't say he has a terrible temper, because now he's sitting there smiling and stroking her head. A couple entered the room, wondering what Zircon and Rafina were doing. The heir to the throne said they could look into it themselves, and tension arose again between the two of them. But Violetta hit the table with a book and said that this was not the time for that, and they needed Zircon's help. To begin with, Zircon needs to get parliamentary approval. His support as the crown prince of this state is very important, so they are asking for help. The heir to the throne smiled, although Violetta didn't find it funny. Adrian thought that the guy supported such a marriage system. In his eyes, it just looked like Rafina loved Zircon much more than him. The guy didn't want this so much that he literally saw the devil in him. Violetta hugged the girl together with Adrian and asked if the little girl wanted to marry her. The heir to the prince could not let go of the brooch that the girl had given him. Holding it in his pocket, he remembered how he had asked his mother for the same one. He wanted his father to give him a gift in the form of a brooch. But his mother said that in the future, he would become king, so he shouldn't act like a little child. He needed to become stronger and tougher. The second prince cannot take the throne, and his father said that he needs to become much stronger and make an effort, because even without the brooch, he will be much happier. He well remembers his mother's words, asking him not to focus on just one piece of jewelry. In fact, he perfectly understood the value of the azure brooch, and he constantly recalled Rafina's words with warmth. The children went to the library, reading a lot of literature. They could not come to terms with the fact that they were unable to annul the marriages. Rafina realized that she had gone a little overboard in her desire to marry Zircon. From the very beginning, she wanted to resolve the issue with the queen and the ruling family, and without that many problems arose. Now the main task is to reveal the fact of Anna's pregnancy. She thought for a long time and could not find a suitable way. Suddenly, Orphan appeared. He knew how to help, and it was just a great option. But Rafina just asked and let him go, especially since she has no desire to look at him right now. The water spirit was very sad, and the girl already wanted to send him away, but Alexander said that it could really be useful. Still, the girl was skeptical and asked if Orphan could help, since he had lived at court for some time. He was very happy and said that he had spent a lot of time in the queen's jewels and now knew how to make her believe his words. But the girl didn't want unnecessary words. She needed a decision right away. But the spirit had one condition. He wanted to take on another form. Still, Orphan is a water spirit that has enormous power. He cannot be called just a stream of thoughts that flies because he is very cunning and intelligent. The lady didn't want to agree with him because she knew he had come up with something bad, so she suggested the bear just throw him away. But the spirit begged her to listen. He called her a goddess, and not for nothing, because she is a true deity who is able to reveal the true form of the spirit. But first, you need to sign a contract, because only after that does the deity truly become the owner of the spirit. But Alexander didn't like it, because he was the first spirit that appeared in her, so a contract had to be concluded with him. The quarrel between the spirits flared up again. They started hitting each other, and the girl's head only hurt from it. Ultimately, the last owner of the spirits lived hundreds of years ago, and now both have long since become mere legend. The spirits did not trust humans, and were waiting for someone who could make a contract with them. According to the plot, it was Violetta who turned this legend into reality. All the spirits were ordinary. The only unique one among them was Ruby. Although he was simple, he was an incredibly strong spirit. In addition, Zircon also had several concluded contracts with spirits in his hands. Meanwhile, Orphan presented himself as incredibly good, wonderful, and incredible. The girl understood that although he was strange, he was not bad. Most likely he can take on the appearance of a rather nice person, even though he has a terrible character. Even though they are just children now. Rafina gave her verdict she would not enter into a contract with him and would return him to the queen. The spirit did not want to return to her and seek another mistress. But still, she couldn't sign a contract with him because Zirkin had to take it. Adrian, closing the book, realized that changing the marriage system was not as easy as he thought. Violetta quietly approached the boy and whispered to him to look in the girl's direction. As soon as he turned around, what he saw seemed incredibly cute. A little girl asleep with her favorite toy. The couple stood over the girl and admired her. Her hand seemed incredibly small, and when they put their finger there, the girl instinctively grabbed it. The couple couldn't help but admire it. Zircon said he was jealous of Adrian, but the guy crossed his arms and stood next to him and asked why he would be jealous. Suddenly, Violetta stood between the boys and said that Zircon would never marry Rafini, even if he were the crown prince, because she was also against it. This couple was incredibly similar to each other. They looked so funny that the guy made the whole room laugh. Arriving from the road, Adrian got out of the carriage with Rafina on his shoulders. A knight met them. He saw that the girl was very tortured. The young man said there was nothing to worry about, and he needed to talk to his parents immediately. Our little heroine woke up because there was a lot of noise around. The older brother and sister noticed this because they were arguing about who would play with Rafina. Her mother picked her up and held her in her arms. At that moment, the young lady saw that her mother was like an angel. The woman asked how her trip had gone. Suddenly, her father looked out the door and asked his daughter how everything went. He looked scary, but gathering all her strength, the heroine reached out to him. Instantly, her father's sad face turned into an incredibly happy one. He even had tears in his eyes, because he had waited for the moment when his daughter was not afraid of him. From her father's strong embrace, Rafina realized that he was actually a very gentle and caring person. At that moment, Adrian entered the room and announced that Zircon was in the capital and Violetta had returned home. The girl calmed down after hearing this, but still planned to kiss the mirror goodbye and offered to take her as his wife again. The older brother clearly patted his sister on the head and told her not to worry, because they would go there more than once. The guy suggested that she not be sad and that it would be better to play with him. The whole family went to hug each other. It seemed that prosperity and peace reigned among everyone. His parents asked Adrian if there was any news in the capital. The boy said that nothing of the sort happened, although one incident still bothers him. Namely, when the knight named Jan brought his wife, and she pushed Rafina. This greatly worried their parents, especially their father. The smile immediately disappeared from his face. He couldn't understand how an unknown woman could do this to his child. He ordered Randell to immediately summon all the knights. His wife stopped him and said that she would meet the queen in person. The Greens ordered Randall to prepare everything for his journey, gather his knights, and be ready to attack. The whole family stood up for the youngest twin sister, agreeing that they must protect her. Realizing that things were bad, the girl tried to fix everything and say that she wasn't even hurt. But her words were not believed, because she was given a lot of attention in the capital, so she quickly forgot about it. But Athena's mother was in the mood to talk to the bride. She wanted to hear some explanations from her side. Our heroine was overcome by some strange feeling. It was a sense of peace, warmth, and complete protection. The girl wanted to turn to her mother, and seeing tears in her eyes, began to cry herself. The daughter and mother cried together, hugging each other. While in her room and talking to the bear, an orphan, she realized that the situation wasn't so bad, because they still managed to get a meeting with the queen. Rafina took the water spirit and said that it should take the necessary form, and they would conclude a temporary agreement. Out of joy, the spirit began to kiss the girl, because she finally accepted him. He couldn't stop until the bear stopped him and asked what he was doing. Orpheus replied that he simply loved his mistress very much and asked what his condition was. The girl replied that he should tell her his plan. He agreed, but he had a counter-condition. Without his strength, this plan could not be implemented. He wanted the heroine to sign a real contract with him if everything went well. He added that he would be a very good spirit and would obey his mistress. The lady didn't understand why the spirit had become so attached to her. There were many thoughts in her head, and she didn't know what to do. Orphan added that he had always wanted to meet a nice host, and the lady replied that Zircon was also nice, although he ignored it. The girl had to endure this in order for everything to work out. She replied that she agreed, but I'm not going to have to teach everything perfectly, even though she sets the bar for perfection, and added that there was one more condition. The girl said that as soon as everything works out, she would first sign a contract with Ruby, her teddy bear, and only then with him. Hearing this, the bear ran to her in tears, because it was incredibly pleasant. He hugged her and said that he had always believed in her. Even so, Orphan accepted all the conditions, although he looked quite sinister. And finally, he began to tell us exactly what his plan was. Orphan had long been in the box with Her Majesty's jewels, and had often been moved from one blue jewel to another. Orpheus has been familiar with Her Majesty's character since she first appeared at the castle, so we spent an incredible amount of time together. Still, the girl didn't understand what he was suggesting. He replied that he knew how to tell the queen that the bride was pregnant by another man. He added that his mistress might not worry, because the empress believed in spirit divination. Fortune tellers, unlike monks and priests, use the power of nature, and not the power of the gods, as the above do. Although they have weak magic in their hands, they survive only thanks to their craft. There is a power of nature that is everywhere, and the magic of spirits that is available to people. It is because of this that believers in God, at one point, began to warn about this phenomenon. Compared to the distant past, due to the weakening of divine power in the modern moment, the power of monks and priests also has this tendency. They always repeat that their power is more noble and just. And in fact, this worries them greatly, because with the change of generations, sorcerers with initially expressed magical power appear more and more often. Our heroine remembered that, in the original, the queen suffered a lot from representatives of the temple. Orphan confirmed that this was exactly the case, so Her Majesty would rather believe the words of a spirit than some priest. Rafini thought that Orphan's plan was not ideal, because negatively minded people could conspire and attack the queen, and he asked her to simply trust him. As soon as Her Majesty invites the capital's sorcerers, she will immediately want to use spirit divination, and it will be as he said, the queen will choose the one she trusts. This is precisely why Orphan will manipulate the sorcerer's power. Suddenly, he added that the woman also deeply believed in the existence of the martial spirit, because he often mocked her. After that, the spirit began to praise itself, and added that it was simply incredible. Athena wanted to visit Her Majesty, but she thought it would happen a little later, and it turned out that she was going there the very next day. She was worried that her mother's mood was like that of a knight who had stepped into enemy territory. Our heroine didn't know if everything would be okay. The meeting with Her Majesty was about to take place, and the maid and butler asked me to follow them for now. Our heroine was surprised at how luxurious everything was in this place. Mom suggested she go and try something delicious. As soon as the girl entered the hall, she saw an incredible amount of sweets there. It was for them that all these luxurious sweets and tea were prepared. Her mother thanked the maid for the tea and the warm welcome. Meanwhile, Athena, holding the teddy bear, ate her fill of sweets. Her mother couldn't understand what kind of person could behave so rudely with a cute little child. The heroine's mother believed that, if this woman had the support of members of the royal family, she would hardly have done anything to her daughter intentionally. It was at this moment that Her Majesty the Queen arrived. The woman apologized for being late because she had some urgent business to attend to. But Rafina's mother replied that there was no need to apologize, because they arrived earlier than the appointed time. She was very worried about a recent situation that occurred when a girl named Anna mistreated her child. The daughter saw that her mother was not ready to stand on ceremony and started discussing it immediately. The woman asked the queen to take appropriate measures, although she personally would not forgive her. The queen responded with understanding, and there was an incredible silence in the hall. Her Majesty sat in thought and did not know how to act, because she could not fully trust Anna's words. After all, on the one hand, she wants to be on the side of the woman her younger brother brought home, but on the other hand, she does not want to turn the Duke of Eston and his wife into her enemies. Suddenly, a maidservant approached Her Majesty. She had news about the sorcerer. It was the same woman she had seen crying by the window. The queen would be happy, because the very wizard she had scheduled to meet with had arrived. The woman also added that she would take a talisman for Rafina, because this sorcerer is the best in the country. The mother replied that she would not mind, and that they would be very grateful for it. The mother whispered in her daughter's ear so that she wouldn't forget to thank her. And at that very moment, The little girl immediately nodded, which made the queen laugh a little. They decided to turn to the spirit world. The real guy in front of them was a sorcerer. It was incredible luck that he came today, at least that's what Rafina thought, until Orphan said that he visits here almost every day. Ruby said that the time had come, and the girl turned to Her Majesty. She pointed to a small book and said that it was the one Selena had read to her, and added that it said that spirits know everything. It talked about various stories about fortune-telling, and she also added that it was all pure truth, because spirits know everything. The queen thought it was very cute. The book was quite familiar to her, because she had read it to Zerkan. They decided to think about the future of the new family as planned. The sorcerer poured out the water, and said that the queen could ask her question. As soon as the woman asked the spirits about Eden's marriage, Orphan immediately took action. The sorcerer had a strange expression on his face, and the queen asked if he was okay. He said that the family would be destroyed, and all because of a seed planted by this very woman. The man added that her soul would destroy absolutely everything because it was permeated with anger and cunning. The queen could not come to her senses. She did not believe and did not want to believe these words. And there was only one truth. The sorcerer showed her the water spirit Orphan. The spirit told the sorcerer that the woman was carrying another child in her womb, and he knelt down. He had no idea how to break the news while our heroine and her mother watched it all. A joyful spirit flew to the girl and asked if he was doing well, but the heroine angrily asked what he had done. The spirit replied that he simply told the version from the universe's side, which is why he had such a reaction. So he believed that it was thanks to Her Majesty that one of the greatest spirits, Orphan, came to him. The queen has drawn her conclusions, and if the sorcerer's words are true, she will have to listen to Rafina. Our heroine burst into tears again, and her mother added that Her Majesty should believe her daughter. Everything she heard and the situation gave the queen a headache because she didn't know what to do. She told the creator and the compounder to listen to her command. It was necessary to call a doctor and bring Anna from the Sapphire Yard to her immediately. The house staff understood everything and said that they would immediately carry out the order. Suddenly, our heroine decided to add that back then, in the dressing room, Anna was sad and repeated how much she missed the Lord of Hertzland, after which she hid in her mother's arms. The queen knows perfectly well who this is. He belongs to one of the families that helps Her Majesty in her affairs. The queen clenched her fist in anger and wanted to hear the rest of Anna's words herself. It was at this moment that the hostess Anna arrived. The queen said that she should go through, and that guests were waiting for her. Coming a little closer, she saw that it was Rafina and her mother. Immediately, the smile disappeared from her face, and signs of distress appeared. Kroleva said that there had been a small misunderstanding between them, and whether it was true. She said that children at this age often come up with different things and easily make mistakes. She added that everything was fine and thanked them for the apology. Marion, her personal physician, entered the hall, but the bride refused his services because she was completely healthy and did not want to cause any trouble to Her Majesty and her doctor. The queen added that a medical examination was necessary because traveling could lead to illness. Although the girl was against it, the queen said enough was enough and ordered the doctor to do his job. The doctor was conducting a medical examination using magical power, and Anna's face was shocked. Taking her wrist, he said that the woman was absolutely healthy, and a little later added that she was pregnant. After hearing the doctor's words, the girl didn't know what to do, and said that it was Edna's child, and no one believed her. The queen asked if she was pregnant by Gerstein. The woman was shocked by what she heard. She didn't understand how one little girl could ruin everything. He ran into the hall, but he didn't understand why his bride was in tears. The queen told her brother that this woman was carrying a child by another man, but Eden replied that he didn't care because he sincerely loved her. Anna thought that everything had worked out for her, and the queen ordered the girl to be taken out immediately. The brother asked his sister not to do anything, but she was adamant. Suddenly, our heroine realized that then, under the window, the maid was crying because of her sincere love for Eden. Although it was not mutual, the queen was sure of her words. The woman her brother had chosen could not join the Rolian family. This was her final word. It greatly disappointed Eden. The woman's words made Rolian lose his temper, and he asked to be struck off the family register. Even the queen was shocked to hear this, and she asked her brother to stop and take back his words. Eden said he would find Anna, and they would leave the castle together. From the emotions she had experienced and all the chaos happening around her, the queen sat down to take a breather because she didn't understand what was happening. It was literally a moment before the queen said that Catelyn should follow her brother. The girl didn't understand what all this was for, and the woman ordered her not to ask questions, but to simply do what she said. The queen had a bad feeling, and it was all connected again with Anna. Our heroine, sitting next to her mother, didn't understand how everything could go wrong, because everything was going according to plan until Eden ruined it all. There was also surprise on the mother's face. She was worried about Rafina, and could not approach the queen because a child should not see such a scene. I thought for a moment that the girl understood what needed to be done. So she told her mother that she was going to the carriage so that she wouldn't think about her and instead focus on supporting the queen. The mother looked at her with a kind and supportive look, as if thanking her for what the girl was doing. She added that she would be there soon and that Rafina should wait a little in the carriage. But our heroine was not heading to the carriage, and it was necessary to quickly find the young owner. The guards barely managed to follow her and asked her to wait because it was dangerous to walk alone. Our heroine was only bothered by the annoying defenders, so she asked Orphan to deal with them. After running a little further, she saw that Catelyn was talking to Eden. It was clear that they had been very close before. After the argument, the man turned and started to walk away, even though the young girl begged him not to. She stood in despair under the tree and did not know what kind of tears were rolling from her eyes. It was obvious that she loved the young master infinitely. Suddenly, a postbird brought an urgent letter from His Grace the Duke. The letter had information about Anna it was worth checking. After reading the letter, the queen screamed, and Rafina's mother was frightened. The queen is very worried, because if nothing is done, even the children will be in danger. She ordered the Eden to be brought to her immediately. Meanwhile, our heroine approached the crying Catelyn. She asked if she liked a Dan. The girl replied that she did, and Mr. Rollin hated her. Orphan scanned the young lady. She sincerely loved her husband, and her soul suffered the most. Rafina couldn't even imagine how much pain the girl was in, so she didn't know what to do, and hugged her. Suddenly, an angry Anna came out from behind the bushes, saying that it was all because of her, that all her plans were ruined because of her. She instantly pulled out the knife and, wishing for the child's death, was about to strike. But a moment later, it was unclear how Anna ended up under the tree. Surprisingly, Rafina's mother is a perfect swordswoman and knocked the weapon out of the crazy woman's hands. She looked incredibly like an angel who would always protect the child. Iden himself was present at the scene and was shocked by what he saw. The queen shouted his name, and a moment later struck him hard. She said he was a fool because he almost got two completely innocent people hurt. She threw the paper in her brother's face and asked if he really wanted to marry a thief who had attempted murder. And the brother got down on his knees. He couldn't believe it all because he had just learned the most terrible secret of the woman with whom he was going to spend his life, sacrificing everything. Her mother asked Rafina if she was okay, but even though she wanted to answer something, she suddenly lost consciousness. Orphan and the bear were watching her intently. Even though the girl simply fainted, everyone was very scared, and most likely, this is due to the fact that our heroine was more scared than she could have imagined. It's amazing that such a kind and sensitive mother was also a cold-blooded knight, and it seemed incredibly cool. Orphan couldn't wait for the deal to be completed, namely the signing of a contract with Emil, but still there must be a ruby first. The bear has been waiting for this moment for a long time and has been preparing diligently, and finally he can show his true nature. The treaty itself appeared before our heroine, and it seemed to her that it was some ancient language, although it was simply the language of their kingdom. Orphan hit the ruby on the head and said that he should have explained everything and retold the meaning. The contract stated that the spirit and its owner were obligated to take care of each other and abide by all the terms of the contract. They can also terminate the contract within 3 days without any penalties. The bear didn't have time to finish reading the contract because the girl snatched it out of his hands and said that it was all incredibly boring and wanted to sign it immediately. After signing the contract, a pattern appeared on the girl's hand and unexpectedly immediately began to disappear. The spirits thought that, now that the contract was signed, it would be easier for them to reincarnate into their normal form. But that was not the case, because even after signing the contract, she would not let them reincarnate right away. Although they didn't like it, they understood this behavior because the girl didn't want to turn such a wonderful place into ruins. Robbie believed that our heroine would find it easier to gain the queen's trust if she gave Her Majesty information about the people around her. But in our heroine's opinion, she is already in a good position because the queen still feels guilty towards her. And besides, they do not have an urgent need to reveal all the cards to the enemies earlier, especially since Her Majesty's trust can be gained in other ways. In human hands, spirits are likely to be used for political purposes. In the original Jurkhan, and even Violetta escaped the power of the aristocrats and entered the academy. If the girl follows the same rules and avoids politics, then Ruby will be happy to wait for the right time. The bear didn't understand why people were so bad, and what right they had to use them for such dirty things. Rafina hugged Ruby and told her not to worry too much about their enemies. After that, she turned to Orphan and said that she wanted to do everything quickly. She lived up to the spirit's expectations, and it seemed incredible. He was very happy, and the girl almost touched the pen to the contract to sign. Suddenly, she ordered him to read this contract first. The spirit defended himself and said that he had never cheated, and that he had no intention of cheating now. He added that she could change the special contract however she wanted, and the girl took advantage of this. She knew that Orphan was very cunning, so she decided to move on to more serious educational measures and included a clause in the contract stating that the spirit had no right to transform without her consent. The contract was successfully signed. Another symbol appeared on the hand. Now, if the queen is cornered, this contract will be a chance to change the situation, although our heroine hoped that this would not happen. Suddenly, the bear said that while he was here, he would try to do everything she wanted, but Orphan didn't like it, because he also wanted to fulfill any wish of his mistress. Both Ruby and the water spirit began to care very much for their owner, as if competing with each other. Although our heroine thought it would be a good idea to get some sleep, she quickly fell asleep along with the spirits. The next day, the queen and Rafina's mother had tea. She was very grateful that the woman had come, even in such a difficult situation, and hoped that the journey would not cause any inconvenience. The woman replied that everything was wonderful, because thanks to the queen's care, they arrived very quickly and safely. Yet she cannot be calm because she thinks about the person who harmed her child. Although it was tactless to address the queen, like that Rafina's mother still wanted to know exactly what Anna would be ordered to do. Our heroine is shocked because such a sensitive and kind mother is now like ice, but she stands her ground. Suddenly, Rafina was scared because suddenly her mother would be against the girl's marriage to the mirror, and then her plan would fail. Finding herself in front of our heroine, the queen asked why she was not afraid, and decided to return to the royal castle again, despite what happened last time. The child tapped the table and said that she was not afraid at all. On the contrary, she was looking forward to another meeting with Her Majesty. The queen noticed that she was a very strong and brave lady, and she also looks incredibly similar to her mother. During the times of chivalry, the woman added that in those days the heroine's mother, along with the Duke of Eston, were truly passionate. The woman was a little embarrassed and laughed. The queen once again added that she personally apologized and that she was incredibly ashamed because of Rallian's stupid decision, a precious child who had already coped so poorly with the previous situation could have been seriously harmed. As for Anne, the queen said that there would be a trial, and her crimes were very serious, so she would most likely not be able to escape punishment. The woman added that the mother and daughter have nothing to worry about. Calling her maid to her, the queen said that, as an apology, she had prepared a gift and hoped that they would like it. A small box was placed in front of Rafina, and it shone incredibly brightly. Although they accepted the gift immediately, the atmosphere seemed tense. The heroine decided not to think long and to look at what was in the box. But when she saw what kind of necklace it was, the girl was shocked. This necklace, which the queen received as a gift from her previous one, looks like it's a gift from her mother-in-law to her future daughter-in-law. The queen added that there was no need to attach much importance to this gift because she had inherited several jewels from the previous queen. She was simply incredibly grateful to Rafina, and this piece of jewelry suits her. The woman added that it was truly a sincere gift and that she gave it from the bottom of her heart. After that, the queen invited Rafina to play with her son in the garden. Suddenly, an unknown boy appeared in front of the girl, and she realized who it was. This is the son of the king and the second prince of the kingdom of Antonio. In the original work, it was he who destroyed the entire kingdom. This very scoundrel is standing right in front of her. Antonio smiled and wondered if she was the girl everyone was talking about because she didn't fit the description. Rafina thinks it's rude, especially since he was poking her with his finger. Ruby was very angry about this and was about to punch the little boy, but the girl calmed him down. But before she could calm the teddy bear down, Orphan the water spirit also started to get angry. Rafina replied to Antonio that she was just waiting for Zircon. Surprise appeared on the boy's face. Rafina decided to ask who was standing in front of her because the queen assured her that only a mirror could enter the garden. The butler whispered to Antonio that they had come where they shouldn't have, and that if the queen found out about it, bad things would happen. Antonio, without thinking twice, hit the butler and asked why they had not come to the place they were supposed to, because he wanted to come to his mother. At the end, he pointed his finger at our heroine and said that this time she was carried away, and she would still remember him. With an evil smile, he walked away. The guy really scared the girl because she didn't understand what exactly Antonio wanted from her. The girl started eating the roast out of stress. She didn't understand what had happened and why the boy didn't react so aggressively. Although she had met such people before, and nothing bad had happened, her thoughts were suddenly interrupted by a mirror that wiped a bit of the burning sensation from her face. He saw that something had happened and asked if she was okay. Rafina remembered that she had to endure everything for the sake of the future. She hugged the guy and said that nothing happened. Our heroine hugged Zircon tightly. She knew it was better not to cross paths with Antonio again. The young man said that he had heard the conversation. Suddenly, she was scared that the guy had heard about the threats from Antonio, and in fact, he was worried about how the Knight Idan had made a lot of trouble for her. Rafina felt better. She said that everything was fine with her, and was surprised that he cared so much about her. Zircon said that of course he cares about her very much, and is always worried. The girl could not recover from what she heard. She could not believe that the constant brainwashing had finally yielded some first fruits. But suddenly, the guy added that she was Adrian's invaluable younger sister, which is why he cared about her so much. It was just friendly solidarity, although that's true, and our heroine is not weak, and she's not used to giving up halfway. She pointed to the necklace and said that Zircon's mother had given it to her with the words that they would get married in the future. But the mirror said that Rafina was just a child. This was her second defeat. The guy added that one should not take marriage so lightly. From all this, it turned out that Zircon simply began to read notations for our heroine, while Rafina realized that she had no other options except for a backup plan that she didn't want to come to. The girl started to be naughty and scream that she still wanted to marry him, but Zircon didn't have time to say a word. The young lady said that people don't get married just because they love each other. Sometimes it's done for selfish or political reasons. The young man became very angry and could no longer understand what kind of scumbag dared to say such a thing. Suddenly, he realized that he couldn't talk to a child like that. He took her by the shoulders and asked who dared to tell her such a thing. Suddenly, our heroine realized that she had come to this conclusion on her own, but she didn't know how to get out of it. In the end, she replied that she had read it in a book. Zirka was surprised by this because he didn't know of any book that talked about this. The girl said off the top of her head that the story was about a crown prince who can't influence his own marriage and simply makes a false promise to marry someone, but then finds and meets a princess and takes her as his wife. Zircon said that he was not a hero, but just trash, because that's not how it's done. He began to read the notes and ordered that, in any case, she should not give such stories as an example, and also that she should never give her heart to a person who says one thing and does another. Suddenly, the children's conversation was interrupted by Rafina's mother. The girl immediately ran up to her and hugged her, and the woman asked if the young lady had a good time. With a smile on her face, Rafina shouted that everything was just wonderful, and she was delighted. Her mother arrived just in time, saving the girl from a verbal attack by the prince, who again wanted to give a long lecture on how to choose the right person to love. At the farewell, the girl took the boy by the hand and said that he would still marry her. This met the prince's expectations. He realized that the girl simply associates him with that prince and is therefore saying such nonsense. He concluded that it was worth informing Adrian about this. Meanwhile, Antonio arrived at Sophia's palace. The prince turned to his mother, who was glad to meet him. His mother is the second queen, Rebecca Ferdinand. She noticed that he was in a bad mood, even though the boy had just arrived. Suddenly, Antonio pointed his finger at the butler and said that he had brought him to the palace of another queen, and that trouble had almost happened because of this idiot. This made the queen very angry. She asked how he dared to bring her son to the palace of another queen. The guards began to lead the butler out of the hall. He begged for mercy, and the queen ordered him to be flogged. The maids were sad because the young man's body would never be the same again. Antonio also added that the duchess came to the queen's palace, and there he met a girl who had returned to the duke's house. He regretted that his mother had not come to meet her, and added that she was quite lovely. Suddenly, he shouted that he also wanted a little sister. His mother wanted to answer that it didn't depend on her, but on his father. But Antonio shouted that he wanted it immediately, and his mother had to calm her son down because it was impossible to have a baby sister so quickly. Suddenly, Antonio said that they could pay the Duchess money to buy the child back from them. Rebecca thought it was a great idea, but she added that they couldn't buy this baby right now. She stroked the boy and said that they would bring him another toy in the meantime. It seems that the second queen was obsessed with her son and would do anything he wanted, and if he asked his mother for something, it would end up in his hands. Meanwhile, Adrian suggested that Ruffini go play together because they hadn't seen each other in a long time. The young lady was happy about this because Adrian is often busy with his studies. This time, it ended early on purpose so they could spend time together. The older brother stroked her head and asked if she loved him very much, which was because she was constantly running away from him even though she didn't want to. Even though she was exhausted and didn't really want to play, she still decided to make concessions for her brother, and hugging his hand said that she loved him very much. She added that she loved her little brother the most, and a smile appeared on Adrian's face. But Adrian didn't just ask her to say that he actually wrote it all down on stone, and her voice could be heard clearly. At dinner, Adrian turned on this recording and said that his sister loved Adrian the most. These words of Rafina caused a negative reaction from the twins, because they are also her brothers. To calm his older brother down, his father ordered him to calm down and draw Adrian's attention to his behavior, because it was unacceptable at the table, especially since they were younger than him. The father ordered the toy to be given to him. He smiled and added that it would be better if he had this toy. Terrace's wife appeared behind him and said that the best place for the toy was hers. While in bed, Rafina couldn't understand why they were all behaving so strangely, and it was embarrassing because instead of eating her lunch, they were almost fighting over this pendant. Ruby said that it's all because they all love her very much. Rafina understands that this is the family that is always on her side and always loves her. The main character is even afraid to imagine the pain the whole family will feel if she disappears again, which is probably why, in the original, Adrian went to a place where he would be impossible to find. Our heroine swore to herself that she would definitely protect her family from this collapse. There was only one reason why the second queen won, and that was a huge amount of money, much more than the first queen had. Tropina smiled. She believes that for once nothing terrible will happen if she repays them in kind. She asked the water spirit if he could transform into a human, and he confirmed it. The harpy was very happy about all this, and ordered to transform immediately, but without any tricks. A strange ruby glow appeared around the room, and the girl was very surprised. Elf-like figure stood before them, blue-haired man. He thought he was incredibly handsome, so much so that he dazzled everyone with his beauty. But our heroine believes that nothing will work out, since she needs a deputy who will carry out her secret work, and in such a magnificent appearance, everyone will think that he is a hunter looking for noble ladies. The girl asked if he had a different appearance, and suddenly he immediately transformed into a beautiful black-haired girl who looked quite a bit like the businessman. The girl was pleased with the result. She touched the harpist's shoulder and said that in this form he suited her perfectly, and from that moment on, he became her substitute. The next day, Rafina and her maid went to the market in the city. Her brothers said that there were many delicious desserts on this street. Because Rafina loves her maid very much, she wanted to eat it with her. The girl's main goal was to explore the market, because at the moment, the royal family's luxury items include monopolizing the market, and the most important product is coffee, a drink made from processed coffee beans. It is currently extremely popular in aristocratic circles, which is why there is so much caffeine on the streets. The girl stopped in front of one and decided she needed to go in. She invited the maid and the defender with her. The woman was surprised by the child's choice. She thought she wouldn't be interested there, but our heroine insisted on it because she wanted to see. The maid asked Rendell for one request, namely to accompany them to the coffee shop. The coffee shop itself was quite sad. Two workers were playing cards and talking loudly. The girl noticed that all the guests were men. Nowadays, coffee houses gather many nobles in one place. The coffee culture here also belongs to men. After analyzing the situation, Rafina realized that sales would increase even more if women were invited here. She asked if there was anything else besides coffee. Randall added that the men gathered here just to chat. This surprised our heroine because she thought that men came here for delicious coffee. But the knight added that the coffee here is pretty bad, and they only come here to talk. And he also said that women don't understand this. The maid decided to drink a cup of coffee, and in Rendell's opinion, it was quite strong. He suggested adding a little sugar, but didn't have time because the woman had already tried it. A moment later, she spat it all back out, because I don't understand how you can drink something that tastes like poison. And the lady touched the coffee with her finger and licked it. Rendell noticed that the book was well behaved, and the maid said that it was okay for small children. In fact, this coffee was simply terrible, even though the knight said it was bitter and not tasty, but in reality, it should be sweet and tart, or with a sour taste. Thinking hard, the girl froze in one state for a few seconds, and the maid asked if everything was okay with her. Rafina replied that everything was fine with her. She already understood in her mind what the problem was with this coffee shop, and that there was not enough delicious coffee and many desserts to go with it, because coffee cannot exist without desserts. I thought that our heroine realized that she could show the true taste of coffee, and it would also help destroy the second queen's business. Judging by the fact that the royal family's largest income comes from the import of coffee beans, instead of stable payments and bonuses to employees, they spend everything on personal entertainment, and in addition, they use mercenaries to physically intimidate employees. Rafina asked the spirits if they should follow the law with such competitors. Ruby slowly began to understand what was going on, and Parafina happily said that they would steal a merchant ship with coffee beans that was monopolized by the royal family. The tired workers on the deck were surprised, because the fog had appeared again. We didn't even know if they would be able to earn well this time. Many of them just wanted to be with their families. It turns out that the workers' families were also held hostage, and they are not paying their salaries. Suddenly, a second later, a pirate ship appeared in front of them. But in fact, it was Orphan's ship, and he offered the workers delicious food. The men are shocked, because even though he was wearing a pirate hat, he didn't behave like a pirate at all, because they plunder ships and take all the money by throwing sailors overboard or killing them. And these pirates offered food and invited us onto their ship. The workers hadn't eaten better food in a long time. You could say they were trying such delicious food for the first time. Now that the poor men had had their fill, Orphan suggested getting down to business. He was curious who was the main person responsible for delivering coffee beans to the ship. Suddenly, the main man spoke up. He said that he was the one who was dealing with all this. He said that if he wanted to kill them, he should do it immediately. If not, then let him tell you what he needed from them. Orpheus laughed, handed the man a contract, and said that this was an offer from the hostess. She was offering them a very profitable contract. After reading all the terms and conditions quite carefully, he was shocked by how wonderful they were, and immediately agreed to them. Orphan came home with wonderful news, and he added that he had hidden the coffee beans so well that no one would find them. She asked if everything was okay with the sailors. The spirit replied that everything was fine, and they signed a contract. He also prepared beautiful and safe homes for them and their families, because he cast a spell of oblivion, and now Viscount Beryl will not bother them. Rafina wondered if the ship was already on its way. Orphan said that he built a special ship for them, because spirit ships are always completely safe. The girl was very worried about something Orphan asked, if everything was okay with her. In fact, she didn't even expect such strong competence. She couldn't even guess that the spirit would approach this matter so responsibly. The girl's words deeply moved the spirit, and it transformed into its normal form and began to hug her tightly. Rafina wondered why such a strong and intelligent spirit as Orphan held on to her so tightly. Ruby said that Orphan was actually a bit devious and wanted something else. So without thinking twice, Rafina directly asked him what he wanted. You replied that you didn't need anything, and our heroine started yelling at him and saying that he was lying, because if he didn't want anything, he wouldn't have done the task so well. Even though the spirit said it was out of the best wishes, Rafina knows his character, and if he tells her everything now, she will definitely listen to him. Well, he fell to his knees and began to beg to find his legendary relic. For spirits, a legendary relic is just like a person's personal home, which is a lifelong dream. Thanks to such relics, the spirit can use its enormous power to fulfill its own desires. After all this, the girl understood why her participation was needed, because the spirit simply could not find the relic without her. In order to find a spirit relic, you need to make a contract, and if the owner fails to find it, no one will ever do it. You are more worried. Rakina asked if the legendary bear relic could cure the queen. Our heroine wondered what would happen after they found their legendary relic, but hearing her wasn't satisfying because they gain absolute freedom by actually using the owner to search for the relic and then become free. She became so angry that she said she would immediately break these agreements, and the spirits began to beg her not to do so. Although in any case, the terms of the contract are still valid for 5 years, but still she will also suffer greatly in the search for their sake, and should she not benefit from it. To please the girl, the spirits wrote a new contract stating that all their savings would go to Rafina, although in reality it was a cheap investment, because in the end they would gain much greater power and unlimited opportunities to make money. Thanks to the money, the harpist was able to build a building located in the central square of the capital and start business immediately. The moment came when the Kafter coffee shop opened. There were lots of sweets and delicious coffee, as any good coffee shop should have. This place immediately fell in love with the noble ladies. They liked it all incredibly much. It was a really good place for both women and men. Zirkin said that she ate little by little and did not forget to drink everything, because then there could be stomach problems. The girl was drinking coffee with joy. She was very tired. The crow entered the coffee shop Bernet. He was surprised, because no one had ever done such a design for a coffee shop. Nevertheless, he still likes it better than the previous pub. The waitress asked what he would order, and his servant replied that they would order the best things on the menu. It was also surprising that women also actively drink coffee, because it is very harmful to their bodies. It seemed to him that they wanted to kill all the women in the capital. Suddenly, coffee and many sweet desserts were brought to his table. He is satisfied, but does sweet really neutralize bitter coffee? While sipping coffee and tasting sweets, he told the waitress that neither children nor women should drink coffee, and she replied that it was a myth. Baran was surprised by such answers, because the main supplier of coffee said that it was harmful to women, although if you think about it that way, he was a terrible sexist. The waitress turned around and said that this was an incredibly strange stereotype, and she didn't even bother to think that there was anyone who believed this nonsense. The man tried some more coffee and was surprised, because it wasn't as bitter as in other coffee shops. The subordinate added that his coffee was indeed a little warm and still tasted good. My husband also noticed that it had a wonderful aroma. Not even a bad smell, most likely a different type of coffee. Everyone liked the coffee from Rafina's cafe, and many decided to hold meetings here. Our heroine was pleased with the result. Panic broke out in the Second Kingdom, not only because their ship had not arrived with coffee, but also because someone had opened a competing coffee shop. It was very strange. The woman did not understand how this could all happen. She asked her husband to calm down, but he started yelling at her because she wasn't the only queen to be so calm about it. He added, telling her to never forget where she came from. And so their conversation ended. He ordered that if there was any news, she should immediately inform him of it. The woman was very disappointed because she was fed up with what her husband always told her. His Majesty was recently on video all the way to the residence. She didn't even have time to meet him in person. The woman wanted to buy off the courtiers, but they turned out to be too loyal, so she can't guess why the king is so angry. The woman fantasized about how to put her father in his place when Antonio became king. The next day, Rafina's mother and the queen talked about the little girl. Unfortunately, she was unable to come to the meeting because she had a cold. It's strange because the woman didn't talk about her own illness as if it were just a trifle. The queen suspected deception, and she had an extremely angry expression on her face. But Rafina's mother did not react to this threat and added that she needed to return before sunset. So she thanked them for the invitation and said goodbye. The queen went back with nothing and was very angry. She believed that the woman considered herself a grand duchess, although if only one of the two queens remained, she would behave completely differently. Rafina happily greeted her mother and asked where she was going. As soon as the girl found out that the lady had gone to see the second queen, she was immediately glad that she hadn't gone there. The man did not understand why the queen would invite his wife. It was strange the woman herself didn't know she seemed to want to get closer to her. It all seemed very strange. From the windows, or Tadler. So perhaps she was acting independently, at least. That's what the Duke thought. Rafina guessed that the second queen simply wanted to establish contact with her father. And it was a good thing that her mother was not prone to such provocations. At night, the girl could not fall asleep. After a few years of reflection, she entered the capital's academy. Just at this time, the second queen will sow chaos between the emperor and the empress and do everything possible to get rid of Zurkan. Through an apocalyptic crack, Zurkan will fall unable to explain what is happening. A crack appeared in the transition between the worlds, and demonic beasts unexpectedly appeared from there, and a very long war with monsters from another world developed. And even though they won, these events tragically affected the lives of 3 people. Most of all, she feared such an ending. She promised herself again to protect Zurkan and not allow death or harm to come to her loved ones. Severe drought is negatively affecting the population. Something needs to be done about this, and the situation needs to be studied. Violetta was worried about this because there was a possibility that the drought would spread to the entire continent. Tuzur Khan believed that this was just a theory, so it was only necessary to solve an existing problem. Violetta stood her ground again because the drought was getting worse and worse every year, and they couldn't know when it would get worse, so it was important to prepare a plan for the near future. Adrian agreed with the girl. He added that the capital needs to prepare comprehensive measures to close and prevent drought. The decanter was incredibly bored. She couldn't understand why at such an age future academy students didn't go to the library. Zurkan stroked her head and asked if the girl was tired. So in response, she simply hugged him and added that everything was fine. She even praised herself because she adapted very well to the situation. She believes she has become a true professional. She believes her skills are at their peak. Over the past 2 years, they had become very close to the mirror. They didn't see each other that often, but when they did spend time together, she tried very hard to please him. She adjusted herself so that he felt comfortable around her. Adrian noticed that Rafina was holding the mirrors too tightly, and it must have been uncomfortable for him, so he suggested they stop the discussion if she was bored. Rilita suggested that they ask Rafina's opinion about the drought together. Adrian said that she was still young, so she was unlikely to come up with anything. But Violetta insisted that at 8 years old, she was already a young lady and could offer something interesting, and besides, she was very smart. She almost started yelling at Adrian because he spoke badly about his sister. He replied that she was just a child, but Violetta was not satisfied with that. After a moment, Adrian agreed that he had done wrong and promised not to do it again. Rafina was also happy to notice that the situation between Violetta and Adrian had also changed rapidly. The mirror found the young couple's quarrel very funny, and when they noticed it, he denied everything and said that he wasn't really laughing. The couple began calling him unscrupulous and impudent. But still, they were happy to see the boys smile, because you don't see it every day. Rafina's very happy that they all became best friends. They all looked very cute. Our heroine also knew about the drought. This is a special time when there will be a split in the relationship between the emperor and the empress, and it is necessary to prepare a little. The girl turned to her mother and said that she really wanted to go to the castle. She said that she really wanted to see the empress. The woman was very surprised by this desire for a child, but she told me that she had an agreement with the empress and that she wanted to come and have a walk with her. And the mother didn't know how to explain to the girl that these words were just a sign quickness, so she decided to first send a letter to the empress and wait a bit. The incident that will lead to a split in the relationship between the emperor and the empress will be an incredible test for 12-year-old Zurkan. And although the parents think that the children do not understand anything within the family, it greatly affects the child's inner state. In addition, Zurkan lives with his half-brother and is not friends with him. No matter how mature a child may be beyond his years, he can still break down from such strong psychological stress. Now the main thing for the girl is to talk to the empress and reconcile her with the emperor. She was in such a hurry that she forgot how to walk properly, so she immediately ran, even though her mother asked her to move more slowly. The empress was happy to greet and see the girl. Our heroine did not forget about the honorable greetings and therefore bowed before the queen. The queen bought quality tea leaves before their arrival, and Rafina's mother thanked her for her concern. The girl was very worried because recently her mother was invited to visit by a second queen with whom the empress had a quarrel, and apparently this did not have a negative impact. The woman asked why the girl was behaving like that. She thought something had happened. Standing on the ledge, she simply replied that she smelled paint. The woman had such a wonderful sense of smell that she complimented her and laughed. Kroleva said that she is learning to paint, and her teacher is one of the best artists in the capital, but there is still room for growth. Rafina was delighted with this. She wanted to take a look at her work. The queen replied that if the girl wanted so badly, she could look and asked not to judge harshly. Rafina happily ran after her. In fact, the empress began to pursue a new hobby because of the emperor, because he was worried about his wife's obsession with the spirit world. So he suggested finding another occupation. So she immediately started drawing. They all came to the room where the empress was painting. The girl wanted to flatter the queen, and in fact, the drawing turned out to be simply magnificent. It deserved all the praise. The woman called it an autumn landscape at sunset. The queen said that this was exactly the landscape she saw in her hometown, where she grew up. Rafina added that it was simply beautiful, and she was deeply surprised. Although the painting was incredibly beautiful, it exuded sadness and loneliness. The girl thought it was an image of the empress in her youth looking at the sunset. With such wonderful skills from the queen, Rafina's plan will work with a bang. The girl said that she also really wants to draw. The empress noticed that her painting had a good effect on the girl. Her mother added that the queen's skills were truly incredible, and she thought this really touched Rafina. Mother suggested that the girl find a good teacher, and the young lady said that she wanted to study with a court artist. Both women were very surprised by these words. With tears in her eyes, the girl expected the empress to agree and allow her to engage with hers. There was no way the rumors that the queen had become close to the duchess could be allowed when the empress was so vulnerable right now. So after a little thought, the queen agreed. Rafina was very happy to hear this. The woman added that their artist was a wonderful person and the most skilled artist in the surrounding area, so he would be able to teach the girl a lot. And she was not at all against Athena visiting the palace every time the artist came. Her mother wondered if her child would cause trouble for the queen. The woman, on the contrary, believed that it was too quiet here, and when Rafina was around, everything seemed to be filled with life. She added that her life was quite boring within the castle. Hearing this shook Rafina's mother. She didn't expect to hear this. The empress is good-natured, and her mother is unlikely to be able to refuse her, although the family tries to maintain neutrality. After thinking a little, the woman agreed, and the empress was very happy about this. Rafina was so happy that she exchanged her mother and was called the best in the world. But the woman asked not to do that in front of her highness because it was disrespectful. The woman just smiled because she was just a child. The queen watched the little girl and her mother. She wondered if all daughters were so kind and radiated so much love. The maid added that there were also many loving sons. The woman added that it was probably none of her business, but in her opinion, the queen shouldn't distance herself so much from her son, because even though he's a prince, he's still a child. The queen agreed, but she should be stronger and stricter like Darkan, although she would very much like to be an ordinary wife and not an empress. That's when she could become a true loving and caring mother to the mirror. The butler brought a letter and local produce for Her Majesty. It was news from her hometown. It always made her nostalgic. She was grateful for it. She thought it was a letter from her mother, but it turned out to be a letter from the Margrave of Wales. Wales is a town near her homeland, and as children, they were close to the Margrave of this territory. The letter talks about how much the drought is affecting this wonderful place, and also about how the support from the population sent by the emperor has not arrived in the appropriate amount. In fact, everything is much worse than she thought, because those in charge of the budget are the queen's people, and most of the food aid was stolen midway through. But there is no evidence to press charges, and if she reports this to the emperor, he is unlikely to believe her. There's nothing you can do. Most likely you'll have to send help at your own expense. If it were like before, She would have sent a knight from her hometown to sort out all the nuances, but now she needs to send someone from the capital. She decided to use the services of the family knight and ordered a response to be delivered. She thought this was the best decision, and the messenger ran as fast as he could to deliver the letter. In fact, it was a pretext from the second queen. She said that the first one was contacting Mark Count behind his back. Meanwhile, the woman was pleased, because her man had done a great job for this. She also asked if a knight of the royal court had been sent to the lands of the Margrave. The woman asked not to say anything to her father, because it would be useful for her. She was ready to do anything for her crown prince, as rumors quickly spread. Meanwhile, the second queen assured the emperor that there was no need to worry too much, because it was unlikely that Her Majesty would do such a thing. But the man waved her away and said he had to leave. The second queen said goodbye to His Majesty. The second queen did not expect that the emperor would go and cause a scandal for the first queen. Meanwhile, the empress and the girl were learning to draw. They looked at the result, and it looked good for a start. The queen noticed that Rafina used a lot of different colors and shades. It seemed to them that it was a wonderful combination. Suddenly, someone entered the hall. It was the emperor himself. Rafina was amazed by his beauty. Although she didn't understand what he was doing here, just as the emperor didn't understand what Rafina was doing here, the girl greeted him, calling him Her Majesty and the son of their empire. She was the daughter of the Duke of Eston, the maid told him. He said he was glad to meet him and ordered everyone to leave the room. The maid quickly took the girl to another room. Otherwise, she wouldn't understand what had happened. Our heroine was afraid that right now the emperor and empress would quarrel among themselves. The maid said that apparently Her Majesty had urgent matters to attend to, so she suggested that they play together. But Rafina ordered Orphan to get her out of here at any cost. Suddenly, out of nowhere, strange drops appeared, which greatly surprised the maid. The woman was shocked by this because the farmer had poured water on them, and surprisingly, the jet of water poured exactly on the maid, although it was not directed at her. The girl said she would wait for the woman here while she changed clothes. While she had a spare minute, the girl thought about how to resolve the conflict and ran to the scene, and besides, nothing came to mind. The young lady saw that Zirkin was listening to her parents' argument. Her Majesty said behind the door that she had no affair with Count Mark, despite the fact that the emperor himself had brought another woman. But the emperor was restless. He believed that the Margrave was sad when he learned that they had married, but the queen could not listen to this. The emperor added that he was not such a fool as not to notice it. He demanded to tell what exactly happened and what they discussed together. He was also nervous that the woman, even in such a situation, tried to remain calm and rational, which is why he found her so unbearable. The empress replied that she was also sick of quarreling with him, and she confirmed that he had had enough. Zirkin heard all this and almost lost consciousness from what he heard. Rafina turned to the guy. He pretended that nothing had happened, although inside he was in pain. He added that it was too noisy here, so he suggested we take a walk. The guy held out his hand to her, and the girl immediately agreed. It seemed to her that Zirkin was not observing such a scene for the first time, although he looked both fine and upset at the same time. The girl could not understand what was going on in his head, when suddenly the stream of her thoughts was interrupted by Zirkin himself. He approached her and asked about how her drawing lessons with her mother were going, and he also asked when the next class would be in. The girl happily replied that it would be the day after tomorrow. The young man replied that he would come to see how they were doing, so that His Majesty could visit his mother again. He added that children shouldn't listen to such things, but Rafina realized that he was still a child and asked him if everything was okay with him. The guy replied that everything was fine, because he had long been accustomed to such quarrels, although the girl understood that this was not so. The day has come when they have another joint drawing lesson this day. It is unlikely that the emperor and his wife will quarrel, because Rafina's mother will also be present. The girl turned to her mother and said that she wanted to see Zirkan and suggest that he go for a walk. Mom allowed it, and the queen ordered the maid to take her to the western garden. Our heroine understood that the serious reflections were due to the fact that he was most likely depressed. The girl did not know if there was a way to improve his condition. The maid asked what the young lady was thinking about, but she replied that she just wanted to see Zirkan as soon as possible. Suddenly, the woman said that His Majesty was currently studying and most likely wouldn't be able to see him before then, so she asked what they would do. This didn't suit our heroine, so she wanted to sneak into the place where he studies. She added that she was very interested in finding out what the crown prince was doing in class. She would just calmly observe from afar. These words struck the maid right in the heart, and she agreed to take the girl to the library. They didn't know what to do, and Rafina suggested that the maid watch, so that no one saw Rafina while she went in alone. The woman agreed with her and wished her good luck, and the girl immediately ran into the hall. She heard some strange scream from the reading room where Zircon studied. The young lady watched the scene as the teacher shouted at him and said that His Majesty would be very disappointed in his son. He added that the guy should tense up and worry, because now the title of Crown Prince remains with him, and it is unknown when another prince might take it away. But Rafina saw that the boy was very upset about this. It's clear that the young boy can't handle such a load. It is at this age that aristocrats hire private tutors for their children, and of course they assign the best teacher for the prince of the table. This is Baron Renschist Zirkin's tutor. He is a very strict perfectionist. It was he who in the original served to develop Zirkin's strong obsession. The guy was completely taken aback by the man's words. He believed that there was nothing wrong with the old man, because he was just talking nonsense and there was nothing to worry about. Renchest again said that the mirror's parents would be very unhappy with his level of education. Our young man resisted these words to the last, and suddenly he wondered what he would do if the old man's words turned out to be true. Suddenly, Rafina couldn't stand the way the old man was addressing the mirror, so she shouted at him that he was too loud. The girl added that people who do not keep quiet in the library should be punished. Suddenly, the girl ran up from behind and grabbed the old man right by his mustache. Darkhan and the girl walked around the yard. He looked calm. They discussed the situation together and laughed about the fact that the old man would most likely never grow a mustache again. It seemed to Rafini that the guy had instilled in her absolutely everything, even the feeling of loneliness. In her past life, she had something similar to think about it. Adrian had a strict but loving father, and a mother who cared deeply about him, and Violetta had a brother and sister. They were all surrounded by good people, unlike Zircon, who is surrounded only by enemies and an evil tutor. Just imagining how hard it was for him, the girl thought she might go crazy. Suddenly, the prince turned to our heroine and told her not to worry. But suddenly, Rafina turned to him and said that she could feel how cold his hands were because he was very nervous, although he didn't show it. Although he is very proud and he is a child, a person cannot grow up psychologically healthy if he is in constant anxiety. Rafina wanted to somehow comfort the boy sincerely and without causing pain. Suddenly, while walking, they saw a red flower. The couple sat down to look at it because it seemed strange. Most likely Zircon said these flowers were planted earlier, and recently everything was sown with green plants. Rafina added that being alone is one thing. She said that this flower is as red as his eyes. Smiling, she added that the flower was as beautiful as he was. Therefore, the girl suggested calling this flower Zircon, after which the boy became very embarrassed. The girl said that this flower also grew in solitude, and that it was amazing, and she should be praised for her hard work. She began to praise the flower for growing and blooming, because it was incredibly beautiful and majestic, even though it was good and lonely. Zircon was surprised by this, and the girl added that she would protect this flower. Rafina also asked him to praise the red flower because it would seem strange that it was made by itself. Surprisingly, the boy was very worried, and in an embarrassed voice, he still praised the flower, telling it how well it did. It seems like the mirror is about to cry, and she wants to hug it and comfort it, hoping that it won't hurt its pride. She understood that he was pretending to be an adult, and that if he cried, she should hug him. Suddenly it started to rain, and the boy suggested they walk home, because they might catch a cold. As soon as the couple returned, Rafina was incredibly happy with an embarrassed mirror standing next to her. As expected, the mother was again worried about her daughter. Looking at this, the guy seemed a little jealous. Her Majesty, seeing this, asked him to come to her. She wiped his head and reminded him that the boy should not lose his pride. Athena told about how she got lost and Zircon found her, and then they got caught in the rain and got wet. Looking at Zircon, she thought that he was like a time bomb, and that he was just a child, and the adults around him made him this way. Our heroine understood that for the sake of the mirror, she had to speed up her work. First, she needed to see the emperor, so she mentally apologized to her mother and greeted Her Majesty. The girl immediately asked her mother to meet with Zirkanal. Her Majesty responded warmly to this and added that he would be incredibly happy. The girl happily ran to the boy. When she arrived at the Imperial chamber, she saw as many as 6 guards there. She introduced herself as Rafina and said she had come to meet His Majesty. Suddenly, the security guard asked if she had an audience scheduled, to which the girl agreed, and said that when they saw each other in the hall, they made an appointment. Of course, even though the meeting was not scheduled, the emperor loved to take an interest in everyone. He thought the security guards had decided to play a joke on him, but a little girl actually came to meet him. He said to leave them, but immediately wondered why she had come, and whether the Duke of Eston had ordered her to lie. But she replied that last time he personally said this in the Empress's palace. She quoted his words, and he remembered what they were about. The man realized right away that he needed to be more careful with what he said, especially when it came to children. Although this was not the first time he had met someone who took empty words so seriously. In the end, the child of the aristocrat Duke of Eston came to him. He did not understand why the girl was visiting him. The old woman Rafina said that she wanted to show him her paintings. Surprisingly, this child was not afraid of him at all. Did ask her directly if the child was afraid of him. This question left our heroine in a stupor for a few seconds. His Majesty already regretted asking the girl such a question, but Rafina replied that she was not afraid of beautiful people. Not understanding what she said a little, he asked her to repeat it, and suddenly the young lady shouted that one should not be afraid of beautiful people. Hearing this, His Majesty laughed so hard that even the servants were surprised. He ordered the girl to come to him and show him the picture. Of course, our heroine was afraid of the emperor, but still decided to lie to him, and it worked. She said that she tried very hard to show off to His Majesty and handed him the drawing. He became curious about who was depicted in the picture and thought it was her mother and father, and the young lady replied that it was the emperor and empress. She said that she saw the picture as if he and Her Majesty were walking along the riverbank, and the man was telling the woman that the weather was just wonderful. Suddenly, he turned the page and saw that there was another picture there. Rafina said that it was painted in honor of the empress because she had heard that Her Majesty distributed grain to the starving Adrian, and Violetta had told her so. Suddenly, the emperor remembered that this was indeed the case, because he had been told yesterday about this incident, how the empress had brilliantly managed to gain the support of the population. Now His Majesty understood that he had done wrong and could not understand why Her Majesty had not told the truth. He became curious about who was depicted in the picture and why she was wearing a halo. The girl replied that Her Majesty is very modest, and if she does good, she will never say about it because of shyness. Holding the drawing, Rafina said that her brother is the same, so she is always the first to start a conversation. All the puzzles in the Duke's head fit together. The man remembered how, in childhood, he was even a little jealous of her because of this. Rafina was frightened because the seriousness of his face and deep thoughts made His Majesty seem even more gloomy. Our heroine understood that due to the lack of communication, more and more misunderstandings appear, which is why the imperial couple is constantly moving away from each other. Suddenly, His Majesty saw another drawing. It depicted a mustachioed man with a monocle and a pointer shouting at a little boy. Novovolinsk became curious about what was depicted, and to better explain it, the girl parodied the teacher's bad behavior and how he teaches for the mirror. The man was simply shocked by what he heard. He didn't know how badly the teacher was treating his child. He was surprised that the man spoke to his son like that. The girl confirmed that everything was exactly like that. Rafina saw that all parents are the same, and that they are capable of scolding their children. But if others do it, they necessarily follow the logic, namely those where only parents can scold their children. The girl drew another picture, and it depicted a bouquet of exactly the flowers that the queen loves. She added that she thought if His Majesty gave her such flowers, she would be very pleasantly surprised. The emperor's face showed mixed emotions. He couldn't even think about such a thing. Joyfully walking down the corridor, our heroine almost sang along to the melody of the song. She thought for a moment and suddenly realized that, judging by the emperor's reaction, he did not hate the empress. The water spirit said that it was the same with the Empress Rafina, asked how he knew, and he said that when the woman wondered about His Majesty, he hinted to her that she should wear more blue clothes. Suddenly, She was faced with the question of why the emperor had betrayed his wife, if they treated each other equally. Unexpectedly for our heroine, Antonio appeared before her. He asked what she was doing here, and if she was playing hide-and-seek, and the girl simply replied that she wasn't doing anything like that, and asked why he was walking around here without a servant. The guy wanted to say something else, but the girl ignored him. This made him so angry that he grabbed her by the hair and started pulling. Antonio said that Rafina doesn't even know who he is, and she won't avoid bad treatment if she pretends to be a good girl. So our heroine is not as simple as he thought. She took this strength and pinched his hand. The prince did not expect such treatment of himself. He could not even imagine that a timid and ill-mannered girl would pinch him. Pleased with herself, Rafina went about her business and continued. As soon as she arrived home, she immediately started drawing her family. Of course, all the brothers wanted to be drawn too. Realizing that it would be necessary to draw the whole family so as not to disappoint anyone, the girl continued her work. Meanwhile, in the castle, the second queen was enjoying tea and a large number of different types of cakes, and it seemed like a great idea to have a tea party. Her gaze focused on one cup. Its value was more than most rare jewels. She always calmed down by looking at it. Suddenly, the woman was distracted from her studies by unexpected news, although she had ordered not to do this under any circumstances. But as soon as the woman heard about her son, and that someone had dared to touch him, she immediately stood up. The woman literally lost her mind, and as if crazy ran to find out what had happened. As soon as she ran into the palace, she immediately saw the boy's wound being treated with alcohol. The mother quickly ran to her child and asked who dared to do this. Antonio replied that he was fine, and everything was fine. He asked the maid why his mother was called, if he had ordered not to do so. The mother demanded that the prince tell who dared to do this. One of the maids raised her hand, saying she had a guess. Hearing the version that it could have been the teacher, her face became very angry again. The queen thought about it because the teacher is a scholar quite famous throughout the empire, and after her arrival, Antonio really became calmer. Most likely the empress sent hers. The woman was sure that it wasn't the maid who touched Antony, because if they had, he wouldn't have behaved like that. The queen was furious because she thought the empress had framed them. She immediately ran to her son and began to feel sorry for him. It seemed to her that her precious son's face had even turned pale from this stress. She ordered the teacher to be immediately called directly to this very room. Meanwhile, the empress, along with Rafina and the teacher, were drawing and they were doing just fine. And the majestic one suggested that the girl take a little break from this. The woman thanked the teacher and said that she was free today. Suddenly, our heroine saw that most likely Her Majesty received the bouquet that same day. The queen turned to the child with a smile and invited him to taste the cakes. The young lady was incredibly pleased with this offer and immediately agreed, saying that she really loves cakes. And as they were just starting to walk down the street to drink tea and cake, something very strange caught their eye. The queen was simply shocked by what she saw. Before him stood His Majesty, the Emperor. He was glad to meet Rafina and his wife. Well, I wonder if the woman keeps the painting he gave her. It was lying in the most prominent place in the hall. He said that he had just found a wonderful frame that would go very well with the painting. The man ordered the servants to bring this frame. Rafina and the queen did not understand what was happening. The emperor shared that this wonderful picture was drawn by a little girl and suggested that it be hung in the living room. I saw that the relationship between them had improved, although they would most likely still quarrel again. Meanwhile, the hanged queen of the second castle burst into the palace of the first. His Majesty and his wife, along with Rafina, did not understand what was happening. The woman brought her son with her to show what she thought the teacher had done. With tears in her eyes, she began to scream at the emperor, telling him how the first teacher sent by the queen had harmed her son. She lifted his shirt and pointed directly at the bruise on his arm. The teacher, with tears in her eyes, swore that she had done nothing of the sort. Antonio's angry mother refused to listen to anything and said that the first empress had hanged her. Our heroine was faced with a dilemma of what to do, because she did not understand how best to get out of this situation. The emperor did not want to listen to these screams and ordered them to calm down. He ordered the younger prince to speak and give an honest answer as to whether the teacher had done it. His face was serious, but his gaze was directed directly at the boy. She was a little worried he didn't know what to say to her correctly. The historical mother again began to justify the little one but added that the teacher had shut his mouth, and under such pressure, the prince would be afraid to say anything. But His Majesty ordered the queen to keep her mouth shut, because an innocent person could suffer. Because of Antonio, he must think carefully and tell the truth. The girl didn't know that it was clear that she was being blamed, and it was true. But on the other hand, you can play the whole situation so that you drive the second queen into a dead end from which she can no longer get out. Immediately, the little one shouted that she had done this to the prince. The emperor was surprised. Also appeared on His Majesty's face. But Antonio's mother said that was a lie, because a child couldn't do that. Our heroine added that it wasn't her, but the spirits. To confirm, the girl summoned Orphan, because if she summoned the ruby, he would break the ceiling. After explaining everything, the girl told how she made a contract with the spirit. And when he saw how Antonio was hurting her, he became angry and defended the little girl. The emperor was very happy to see the water spirit. He asked to tell the truth immediately, while the little boy was shocked. The young man agreed that the girl did it. The second queen was so angry that she even scared Rafina with her expression. The little girl was not at a loss and went to apologize to the teacher because she was the one who had blamed her. The young lady added that she would cure her and ordered the spirit to help her. After that, Rafina turned to Antonio and said that you shouldn't touch people's hair, but still forgave him for hurting him. She also healed the robber's wound, although she could have done otherwise. His Majesty ordered the second queen to return to her castle. For the first time, he decided to forget that the second queen had dared to tarnish the empress's honor. The amazing and second queen left very quietly. She had nothing to say against it. Most likely the woman was shocked. The emperor was incredibly delighted. He added that this was a blessing from the empire. He asked if the Duke of Eston knew about it. But still, if the parents confess this later than the emperor, they will have to be reassured for a long time. The joyful emperor ordered the Duke of Eston to be immediately invited, and the empress congratulated him with the good news. He added that this was all thanks to our empress, who had great merit because she treated the problems of the people with warmth. Everything turned out much better than planned. Rafina was pleased with the result. The girl was waiting in the emperor's hall for her parents, but surprisingly, her parents arrived very quietly. The security announced that the Eston couple had arrived. They both looked very worried and arrived as soon as they could upon hearing the news. The emperor was simply in a wonderful mood. He said that an incredible miracle had happened, although her parents could not understand what had happened. Having explained everything, the parents decided to return, and suddenly His Majesty turned to our heroine. He said they needed to talk alone. This really excited the parents, because they were worried that the emperor would demand this from the little girl. His Grace breathed his last and thanked her from the bottom of his heart. For thanks to her, they had reconciled with the empress. The young lady added that her parents do not quarrel, but their son Zircon is very sad because of the quarrels between the empress and the emperor. The man didn't understand what the child was talking about, and she added that children get nervous when their parents argue. Well, his lordship replied that Zircon must harden himself and become stronger like a sword, because in the future he will become emperor, and he will have many difficult choices. He added that to become stronger, one must endure the heat and blows with a heavy hammer to become a strong emperor. But our heroine replied that he was just a child like her, and not a sword at all. She added that people are not swords and this can only break them. She lost control of herself and called His Majesty stupid, because with such behavior, a person would simply break down and die. Suddenly, the man understood the whole situation, because Zircon was not receiving any support, warmth, or love at all. Turned pale from understanding the whole situation, because all this time he had simply been waiting. He stroked the child and said that the girl had taught him a lot, and pointed out his big mistakes. He promised to give her anything she wanted. The man didn't even expect that the child could be much smarter than her peers. I thought for a moment that the girl immediately said that she wanted Zircon to change teachers. She would also like to walk with him more often. At the end, she added that if His Majesty wants to see her drawings again, he should tell the Empress about it because they are learning to draw together. The Emperor is shocked by how well the girl thought everything out and reconciled them under the pretext of drawings. This child is incredibly smart and wise. The man believed that the Duke of Eston wanted to extend his hands to Zircon. The man's face showed nothing but the pure pride of a father for his child. His Majesty saw that the viscounts and tablers had too much power. He ordered the queen's budget to be immediately reduced and an investigation to be carried out in the lands of Viscount Tadler. The queen was simply delighted. She understood that it was because of Rafina that the water spirit appeared during the fortune-telling. The woman added that she was in a huge debt to the girl, and that if she had not explained all this, Her Majesty would have found herself in a very difficult situation because of the queen. As a thank you, Her Majesty decided to give her a gift and fulfill any of her wishes. Without thinking twice, Rafina asked to convey her words to Zircon. Rafina's mother and Her Majesty were surprised by the girl's words. The young lady walked with a contented gait to Her Majesty to hand over the letter, but Antonio appeared on her way and asked where she was going in such a hurry. The young lady decided not to answer anything, but simply to say that it was none of his business. His servant shouted that this was a terrible disrespect for His Majesty. The prince and Antonio ordered him to step aside and calm down. He added that it was still a bit rude and that he was just a child, and he also wanted to apologize for the previous time. Rafina directly asked why the guy didn't say that she was the one who grabbed him. He should also be ashamed that his mother hit the teacher. It seemed like he had very little conscience. Antonio was shocked that the girl was speaking so rudely to him, and the young lady said that one should not behave like that with subordinates, and that one should put oneself in their place. But Antonio burst into tears, saying he was afraid that the girl might be in danger. Hearing this greatly impressed our heroine. The young man said that he just wanted to protect her, because if he had named the girl, his mother would hardly have forgiven her. Surprisingly, everything is fine now, and Antonio promised that he would desperately protect the girl in any case. Rafina just didn't want some crazy kid touching her hair. But Antonia said that she didn't listen to him, which is why he got angry. So Rafina replied that this was no reason to grab someone by the head. To show how unpleasant it was, the girl herself grabbed the prince by the hair and asked if he was happy. The servant was shocked by such behavior. Antonio was shocked because he didn't like being touched and reacted to it with a smile and said that everything was fine. He wondered if the girl liked his beautiful locks. During this conversation, the young lady saw that the young man did not understand her, despite the strength of her lecture. The guy asked where the girl was going and why she wanted to meet his brother, but our heroine didn't want to explain anything. All Antonio did was simply look at her in a daze. He decided to return to the castle as well, and calmly walked back. Rafina believed that as soon as Jurkin arrived, she would give him the letter and hear the answer. While she was waiting, the maid came and brought her some treats. Suddenly, our heroine wondered if the teacher had been replaced by a mirror, and most likely the teacher had been replaced without an official introduction, so as not to spread gossip. Still, if the teacher were to replace the mirror, because it was causing the boy emotional pain, it would most likely cause a severe blow to his authority. Suddenly, she remembered that, in the original, there was another teacher. He was gentle and always chose the right words. Although from the other side, you can see a completely different thing. This teacher was quite different from the others, because he was against the methods of memorizing material, and always asked the student for his personal opinion. Zirkin was shocked by this approach. He believed that this was the best teacher that only he could have. As soon as Rafina came to visit the boy, the teacher said that they could take a short break, because studying for so many hours was hard. Zirka didn't understand that if this was a guest, then most likely Rafina had come, and she happily greeted him. As soon as the boy saw her, he had a strange feeling as if something inside him was trembling. Our heroine handed over a letter from Her Majesty. The boy was surprised by this. The young man didn't understand why he had to fulfill Rafina's wishes instead of Her Majesty's, but it was logical because she was his mother. Zirkin wondered what Rafina wanted from him. The lady grabbed his hand. She said that she wanted to see him as her husband. At least not really. She added that it would be purely for political purposes, so that the mirror would not consider anything like that. She believed that if in the future the guys needed such a marriage, then she would be an ideal candidate. Zircon said that it was such a stupid principle for the girl to stop reading literature, because many aristocrats marry solely for love, so our heroine should marry the one she loves. Remembering all those warm moments and Rafina's expressions of love for him, he thought about it and stopped saying what he wanted to say. It suddenly seemed to him that the girl really loved him, and he decided to make sure of this by asking her. Rafina replied that she loved the guy unconditionally. Hearing this answer, he promised that they would definitely get married. The girl jumped up from what she heard. She was very happy. Suddenly, the heroine learned that Zirkin was jealous of Adrian because he had such a wonderful sister. The young lady extended her finger and invited him to become a family and promised to marry her. The young man crossed his little fingers with her and promised that they would definitely become a family. The next morning, the girl woke up from a deep sleep, and the weather outside was wonderful. Unfortunately, on such a wonderful day, she couldn't go out into the yard. Although that's understandable, because she owns spirits that are several hundred years old. Recently, scholars who study spirits and magic have begun to come here. Even high priests and believers of other religions began to visit the girl as soon as they learned about the existence of the spirit. They needed official verification, although it was more like a biological experiment. The emperor condemned the actions of the temple because they wanted to experiment on a child. Therefore, recently, religious figures have also been condemned by the rest of the population. Because of the girl, her mom and dad are very busy at work, and they are constantly receiving business offers. While walking down the corridor, our heroine heard someone calling. It was her mother and father. They thought it was still dangerous outside. She said she would just take a walk in the garden, and it wouldn't be a big deal. The woman agreed, but asked not to go outside the gate under any circumstances, because it was dangerous. Of course, as expected, people always wanted to collaborate with the owner of the spirits. However, because of the girl, her parents' employment has increased, but this will bring a positive result in the form of huge profits. A teddy bear who couldn't stand it anymore until they reached the edge of the garden. He thought she had completely forgotten about him. Suddenly, on the way, she met Violetta, immediately hiding the teddy bear. She joyfully greeted her. The girl came to play with her because she was bored. I asked our heroine where she was going, and she said she was heading to the garden and invited me to come with her. Adrian himself was standing there writing something on a card. As soon as he saw the girls, he was immediately happy. Violetta asked what the young man was doing, and he said that he hadn't finished the drawing yet and didn't want to show it. Violetta said that she also hadn't done her homework yet. Athena had a great idea to draw a picture together. The girl was surprised that the young lady was also learning to draw, and this turned out to be true, and she had already had good success. She asked the maid to bring everything, so that Violetta and Adrian could also paint the picture. Still, there was one more problem that kept on her mind: bringing Adrian and Violetta together. Rafina asked Orphan to help her. He said he could be relied on, and by transforming into her, he gave a little time for the true heroine to take Ruby to the edge of the gardens. She was just approaching a place where no one would notice her. After that, she ordered Ruby to quickly start what he wanted. Everything around began to glow purple, and even the birds flew away. Meanwhile, Orphan and the couple felt a strange tremor in the ground. Just at this time, Ruby took on his true form. He was just a huge bear. This was the reason for the postponement of Ruby's transformation. He was too big. Having assumed his true form, the spirit was sincerely grateful to her, and the heroine realized that he was much greater than she had imagined. Meanwhile, the second queen's father scolded her for being worthless and unable to do anything. The man was furious, because now there would be a tax audit in the Second Kingdom. Rebecca had to calm the emperor and keep him in a shackled position. He was also very angry that a girl appeared who was holding spirits, and even worse news was that the inspection seized all the documents of the sugar business. This is a really strong blow to the man, because at this rate things will get really bad. He ordered to request an immediate audience, and the guard replied that His Majesty was not receiving anyone today. Still, he accepted it. In the emperor's castle, he behaved very disrespectfully, which was pointed out to him by the maids. But he wasn't interested in that. As soon as he saw his daughter, he immediately approached her. The woman didn't even have time to ask why her father had forgotten about etiquette before he hit her in the face with all his strength. A noticeable bruise immediately appeared on his left cheek. The husband believed that she had no right to talk to him about etiquette. He said that the girl should not forget who really has authority over her. The old man wondered why Rebecca dared to contradict the empress, especially since he had always said that she needed to keep herself and the emperor in check. After that, the father left the woman. She was disappointed and very angry. If Antonio had not been very unreasonable, then there would have been no need to go and quarrel with the empress. If she had found out about the spirit earlier, she would have used Rafina for her own selfish purposes. She ordered the maid to immediately summon the prince, adding that all the servants who had been in front of her and the teacher the previous time should be behind bars. Antonio entered the hall, wondering if his mother had called him. An incredibly angry woman stood in front of the window and turned to her son, wanting to know why the boy didn't tell the truth right away. Antonio didn't know what to say to her. He just stood there in a stupor. The woman said that her son doesn't even realize how badly his mother suffered because her son dared to deceive her. It was because of him that the emperor hated her. The woman hit her son with all her strength because she had no one else to vent her anger on. The guy tearfully apologized to the woman because he didn't know it could have happened like this. She took his hand and told him to follow her. At the same time, in the Empress's castle, His Majesty was interested in Rafina's progress in painting. He asked what the girl was drawing today, and she replied that it was trees, lovers secretly in love with each other. Suddenly, Rafina asked the emperor if he could draw well, and such a question surprised him greatly. The girl added that Her Majesty had excellent drawing skills and suggested studying this art with the empress. The couple even blushed when they heard this, but the emperor still agreed. Everything was going according to our heroine's plans so far, although after a second she realized it was a mistake. Suddenly, the emperor noted that the daughters were incredibly cute and suggested that the empress try it. The servants were incredibly happy because the imperial family had stopped quarreling and were finding more and more things to do in common. Meanwhile, things were incredibly bad in the Second Kingdom because the second queen found out that His Majesty was visiting the first queen's palace again. The woman didn't want to believe it. She understood that her power was beginning to fall rapidly. She also can't stand her father anymore. Suddenly, she remembered an aristocrat who could look her father sternly in the eyes. It was Count Foulard, because in the past, they had been lovers. When she became the second queen, he said he didn't want to interfere with her and moved to another country, but rumors emerged that he returned a few years ago, and she considers him her second chance. He would most likely trust and help her. At least at the very least, he was much better than her father, and yet the ultimate goal was to make her son the crown prince. She ordered her subordinate to secretly send a letter to Count Foulard. She added that no one under any circumstances should ever know about this. In fact, the postman was her father's man, and when he read this letter, he became very angry. He understood that although Count Fowler was a handsome idiot, his position could become much more difficult because of him. Suddenly, the assistant said that she needed to tell her husband something. She whispered something in his ear, after which the old man understood everything. Adrian, along with Violetta and Rafina, were happily walking around the yard. The girl wanted to move faster and faster, and her older brother asked her not to hurry because it was very dangerous. Suddenly, on the way, they came across Zirkin, who was standing and thinking about something. He was delighted and even seemed a little embarrassed to meet her. Adrian asked why his friend decided to come visit. You said that his classes were over, so he decided to spend some time here. Adrian was sad because Rafina was hugging his friend much tighter than he was. He thought it was unfair, and Violetta found it all very funny. The guy didn't expect to meet them here, so I asked how they were doing. It was time to ask the young man how he was studying with the new young teacher. Zirkin replied that he was a good teacher, kind and erudite. Violetta was happy about this because she had heard that the previous teacher was very strict. It is because of this that the Crown Prince's mood is much better, as is the mood of our heroine. She hadn't seen the boy so peaceful and calm in a long time. It's a pity that soon she will be separated from these three beautiful people for 10 years, as each of them must go to the capital. Adding to the complexity is the fact that this very moment will be especially difficult for the mirror. The young lady concluded that this could not be allowed because the starting point of Zirkan's progressive descent into madness was the death of the Empress. This is the very first thing our heroine must decide, and yet she still does not know the cause of the Empress's incurable illness. Now, all that remains is to carefully monitor the situation and prepare for an unexpected turn. The lady was worried because she needed to find the relics of the spirits, otherwise nothing would work. While the other children were talking calmly, Rafina couldn't control her own thoughts. She was very afraid that everything would not go as she had planned, because there was very little time left. Besides, she would be very sad and lonely when everyone left for school. She pulled herself together and realized that she had nothing to be sad about because it was all for the happiness of her brother Adrian. In the same year, thanks to Viscount Thaler, the fact was revealed that the Empress was beating Antonio, which is why the woman will be in a monastery until the young man turns 18. But the little boy fell into the hands of Viscount Tadler. The girl could not even believe that Antonio was periodically beaten. But if you think about it like that, the second empress left the capital, and this contradicts the original. And if you think about it logically, there is a possibility that the first queen will not die either, because the first person who wanted her dead was the second queen. Rafina promised herself to protect the woman and pull herself together. And there was no way Antonio could be allowed to become crown prince. Time passed quickly, and winter came unexpectedly. The girl and her older brothers set off on a journey. Everyone has already been waiting for her, and we need to hurry. She had a lot to think about, but there was nothing she could do now because they were going away to the Aranad Academy. It will be very dangerous there, and our heroine was worried about Violetta the Mirror and Adrian. Mom saw her son off on his journey. She said that there would be many heirs from other families in that place, so it would be difficult, and sometimes even very difficult. But still she believed in the boy and knew that he would cope. She asked him not to forget to take care of his health. The guy happily promised that he would follow all the rules. The young man did not forget to say goodbye to Rafina, his beloved sister. The girl quickly ran up to him and hugged him with all her strength. Leaning against her brother's chest, she muttered that she would be waiting for him impatiently and asked him to come back soon. The parents laughed, because it was clear that the girl did not want to part with her brother at all. They simply have a wonderful relationship. Violetta added that they were also leaving. Our heroine turned to Violetta and asked her to come back soon, although sadness was visible on the child's face. But when Rafina looked at Zerkan, she immediately burst into tears and ran to hug him. Well, she asked me not to forget that he was going to marry her. In response, the young man simply smiled. Having been there a little, he said that he promised and would keep his word. The young man assured that they would definitely get married. The young lady gave the boy a nudge and was reassured. Adrian joked that he hadn't given his consent to the marriage yet, and Violetta said she was very sorry. Everything was prepared, so the young students could go to the academy. At the farewell, Rafina hugged the mirrors tightly and lovingly. For a moment, we thought about the fact that he would forget about the promise, but still it seemed quite unreasonable. In farewell, the girl shouted that she would wait for her brother and friends. She asked them to be careful, because this was their first long separation. In the original, after 6 years, a spatial rift occurred, absorbing the light of one part of the continent where the academy was located. This fault was called the Cracks of the Apocalypse. Demons began to emerge from it continuously, and every day there were more and more of them. Even the capital's sorcerers could not cope with this trouble. At the same moment, the Arenad Academy, which was located not far from the crack, will make a decision that will change its fate. The Academy's senior students were given a choice because in an extreme situation, no one can guarantee safety, so anyone who wanted to could return home, or stay in the Academy and compete side by side with monsters. Until the course of history contradicts the original, most of the students, including Violetta the Mirror and Adrian, decide to compete. It was a brutal war where humanity was in a weak position. As planned, Violetta became the owner of the spirits of fire and snake. Zerkan once found himself in a dangerous situation, but the pendant that Rafina gave him protected him. Legends say that when the spirits of darkness meet with the spirits of light, it greatly changes the course of the war. A year later, Viscount Tadler became alarmed as the entire empire was filled with news of the Knightly Order's victory over the Eastern Prince. He sent Antonio to the frontier barbarian combat zone so that he too could achieve great success. And 6 years later, news broke that the Crown Prince of Mirrors had closed the crack of the apocalypse. The girl's older brothers were shocked because it was amazing news. During this long time, the girl herself managed to grow up and transform from a child into a beauty. As the heroine had guessed, they managed to close the crack, albeit a little late, so perhaps the best knights will be able to return home in the winter. She was so happy that tears began to appear in her eyes. She hadn't received a single letter from them for 2 whole years, and now the war would soon be over, and they would return. Suddenly, her thoughts were interrupted by a servant who invited her to dinner. Going down to the bottom, our heroine thought it was a great decision to have dinner with the whole family at least 4 times a week. After all, everyone in the family is very similar to each other. Meanwhile, her brothers joined the capital's garrison of Evanston. In the future, they wanted to become commanders of the 1st Guards Division, so to speak, to follow in their mother's footsteps. Meanwhile, the mother was sad because her children would only return in the winter, even though there were only a few months left, and it seemed like an eternity to the woman. Rafina's father assured his wife that everything would be okay. If all this happens in winter, then Rafina herself will have already graduated from the Imperial Academy and passed the coming-of-age ceremony. Our heroine had already relaxed and thought that she wouldn't have a problem, but in reality, everything was still ahead. Parents were also worried about this. Her father didn't understand why a marriage proposal was received immediately after the coming-of-age ceremony because it was vulgar and low, even though he himself had proposed marriage immediately after Rafina's mother came of age. The girl wondered if her parents were just as worried about Lupa and Louis. But on the other hand, her daughter was a completely different story. The lady decided to visit Ella's house and was happily greeted by the owners of the Mason Empire Tea Service shop. She came because she was incredibly curious to see their new product. The woman said that she would definitely show it to him now. It was a new tea set. It looked simply amazing. As soon as the young lady saw him, she immediately fell in love with him. She was curious how the couple achieved such a wonderful color. The woman replied that it was all thanks to trial and error methods. Rafina liked the set so much that she decided to give one to the Empress, which was a great idea because it would further enhance the family's reputation. The main character no longer looked like a little confused girl. She was a confident and businesswoman. After some good shopping, she decided she needed to go home. Arriving at the Empress's hall, the girl immediately laid out her gift. The queen's face showed incredible surprise. She was shocked by the beauty of the current set. The young lady said that she is friends with the master of this brand, so she can buy such sets before they go on sale. They were of simply incredible quality, incredibly pleasant to drink from. Now, in addition to coffee, black tea is also imported to this continent, so over time the business has only flourished. For appearances, it is under the control of Orphan, but in fact the owner is our heroine. Suddenly, Rafina asked a very strange question. She wondered if the queen had been in any pain lately. The woman added that there was nothing to be afraid of. She had already been to the doctor yesterday, and he had found nothing. Rafina added that everyone is worried about her, which is why she is asking about the queen's well-being. At the moment, there seemed to be no signs an incurable disease that was present in the original. While enjoying another cup of tea, the girl ordered Ruby to scan the nearby area for danger because there might be a spy hiding poison somewhere. Ruby replied that everything was clean today, while Rafina talked about how everyone would be back soon and how she couldn't wait to meet the guests. Returning home accompanied by the maid, I'm relieved because today was a wonderful and fruitful day, and I can go home. Suddenly, she met Antonio, whom she hadn't seen for a long time. The lady replied that she had already heard about the prince's return, and you wondered why she hadn't visited him. Rafina didn't understand why she had to do this, and he just made an incomprehensible sound. He asked if the lady remembered his letter. Suddenly, she remembered something like this. After thinking for a bit, she remembered that a few years ago, a very sweet and charming letter had indeed arrived. Suddenly, she frowned and replied that she was not his friend, because he insulted her and pulled her hairs. Vedi didn't understand why he was silent and looking at her, so she decided to say goodbye to the guy. To avoid further conversation, she slipped away so quickly that he didn't have time to say anything. Suddenly, a thought flashed through Rafina's mind, because when Antonio returned, his mother would have to return. Rumors spread around that a saint had appeared in the temple who could bestow God's blessings, and who would not refuse even people from remote villages. In fact, Rebecca could not bear the blessing of the poor, and yet she had to endure it. And everyone, including the emperor's father, and even Antonio, cried an incredibly large number of tears. But on the other hand, thanks to this, the medicine that she had given to the emperor would reappear in her hands. Grabbing the magic amulet, she swore that everyone would pay back for what they had done to her. Returning to the capital will not be a problem for her. The only thing that is needed is for the medicine to fall into her hands, and then she will again make the emperor drunk and seize all power. After reading the new letter, the girl did not understand how the saint was spreading rumors that the new crack had closed. On the way down, Rafina met Bastian. She asked us how he ended up here. She thought he decided to meet with Luca and Lois. He laughed and confirmed her guess, even though her older brothers were late. Rafina invited the guy to a meal, and during the conversation, he learned that she would soon graduate. The young man shared that when he saw her in the courtyard, he heard her talking to His Majesty Antonio. He would like to have the same friendship with her. But the young girl didn't have to think long. She immediately realized what the guy liked. Of course, it was rude to treat a guest like that, and she said she needed to leave. The guy, filled with feelings, was left alone, waiting for the heroine's brothers. Meanwhile, Rafina breathed a sigh of relief. She thought she would never get out of there. Similar situations had happened several times at the academy itself. Many of the boys showed interest in her, and one way or another hit the iron wall of her coldness. After all, she kept all her sincere feelings for the mirror, to which she had made a promise in childhood. She wasn't going to tell Violetta about the arranged marriage, because there were things they were better off not knowing. This winter, the military regiment is returning to the capital. Suddenly, a servant ran to the man and said that Mr. Adrian had returned. The parents were happy to hear this, although at the same time they were worried. Together with him, Violetta arrived at the Duke's estate. The sister, along with this family, joyfully welcomed the couple, and the girl hugged her brother. The pleased Duke even shed a tear because he was shocked by how quickly his children had grown up. Violetta hugged Rafina tightly. She added that she didn't even know how she could leave such a beauty here all alone. She once again noticed how beautiful our heroine had grown. Adrian took Violetta by the shoulder and said that she had overdone it with alcohol. He invited her with him and said that they had something to talk about. A moment later, Violetta asked for everyone's attention and wanted to make an announcement. Adrian started and still agreed that it was worth talking about now. The couple shared the happy news that they are getting married soon. Athena was so surprised that she screamed. The brother thought that his sister was sad because of this news. But on the contrary, Rafina was incredibly happy about it. Sitting on the windowsill, she was happy because the plan was progressing successfully. Based on this, Jurkan and Violetta will not get married, and you can no longer propose to him to marry her. The lady was pleased with herself because her hard work had brought results. The next morning, Rafina was walking down the corridor with her maid. She believed that the Empress was happy to see her children again. At first, the Emperor and Empress were very happy to see their son. As soon as the lady entered the Imperial Hall, she was greeted by the Queen in good humor. The girl seemed to be glowing with happiness. Her Majesty already knows that Violetta and Adrian have decided to get married. She also learned that they want to borrow the Great Hall of the Imperial Court for this purpose. The Queen added that this was well-deserved for the war heroes. The girl was shocked by what she heard, because in history, only a few families had had their weddings in this hall. Rafina couldn't even imagine how happy her parents were because of all this. The Queen shared that she even manages the Duchess a little. She said that Zircon was in a bad situation. According to the original story, Jurkan didn't want to get married at all, so he offered Violetta a contract marriage. The heroine thought about all this, and her thoughts were interrupted by the Queen, who hinted that soon the girl would come of age and she would receive many marriage proposals. Her Majesty also said that the mirror would arrive soon, but the girl would not want to see it yet. Rafina seemed to be lost in her thoughts, and replied that everything was fine because they would meet soon, and to start, she needed to meet Violetta. She understood that it was better not to look in the mirror for now, because she needed to finish everything first. While nothing happened, she wanted to return home, but it didn't work out because she crashed right into Jurkan. Upon seeing the young man, the girl began to fall, and the prince immediately caught her. When the couple faced each other, a moment of awkwardness passed between them. His Majesty the Crown Prince said that they had not seen each other for quite some time. Of course, she had nothing to do with him. She didn't even know how they ended up in such a situation. Rafina, who had not noticed such details before, now understood why Zircon praised him so much, because his nose seemed to have been painted with an artist's pencil. Beautiful and slightly moist lips, and a melancholic look. He was so handsome that the heroes, Jurkan, hoped that the girl remembered the promise she had made to him, but most likely she had completely forgotten about it. And at that moment, she said goodbye to him and said that she needed to go on her way. The young man wished the girl a safe journey and asked her to take care of herself. The young man even felt a strange tightness in his chest, and Rafina realized that she couldn't just wait until someone talked to him about a contract marriage. It was necessary to clarify everything immediately and come up with the best way to do it. The Queen met the mirror. It looked broken. It told her what had happened to the girl. The Queen recalled how, as a child, Rafina constantly asked a boy to marry her, but in her opinion, the girl still had not changed her mind about her choice. From what he heard, Zircon lost his train of thought. In his head, there were only his mother's words that Rafina still loved him. Of course, the queen exaggerated her words a bit and didn't think there was anything wrong with pushing the guy. Suddenly, the young man told his mother that he had forgotten to do something and left the imperial room. He needed to think about what Rafina really felt about him. If his mother is right, then most likely the girl behaved like that because she was worried. It's been a long time since he last met the lady, so he thinks he doesn't know her at all. His thoughts are filled only with Rafina. He doesn't know what to do, right? Let alone offer her his hand and heart first. Rafina's coming-of-age day arrived, and a large number of people gathered in Evanson Hall. There was a huge amount of whiskey cognac, and Rafina wanted to try all these types of alcohol. She mentally said goodbye to the endless era of immaturity. She decided to try what was right in front of her first, and after midnight whiskey. But her brothers stopped her, because they didn't want to leave the girl alone. They knew that there were many bad people among men, so they didn't want anyone to offend her. Such strong guardianship from her brothers irritated the girl, and then news came that her brother had arrived. Suddenly, the girl heard Violetta's voice and was shocked at how beautiful Rafina had grown and dressed up. Adrian appeared behind the girl and said that he was taking Violetta with him because he was her partner at today's party. Rafina was delighted to see the love between her brother and the girl, and she hoped that she could bring this couple to a happy ending. The older brothers invited the heroine to dance. While dancing, one of the twins said that the girl danced beautifully. Zirkin himself came to this ball. When he was right in front of her, he seemed like the most beautiful man in the world. He was the real main character. Rafina thought he was too close, and she was a little confused. The young man asked her to be more focused. She didn't know how to do it, because his beauty took her breath away, not to mention controlling her movements while dancing with him. Emotions took over. She could barely hold her heart in her chest. Surprisingly, even a few minutes after dancing with the mirror, the heat throughout my body did not go away. She was so enamored with the young man that she couldn't concentrate when suddenly Antonio appeared behind her. The entrance to the terrace was closed by guards, but still the second crown prince has the right to go wherever he wants. He said that the girl danced with his brother, so he also wants to ask her to dance. He was angry that the girl wanted to dance with the mirror and not with him. Antonio still thought they were close enough to dance together. The young man asked if the girl had read the letter he had sent her before the trip. Rafina didn't know how to behave with the guy. The best way out for her seemed to be to leave the terrace and go back into the hall, because if she spent too much time with one young man on the balcony, the other guys might misunderstand the situation. Antonio became very angry and left the girl alone. Our heroine thought it was ill-mannered. He had no manners because he didn't even apologize. Rafina's thoughts are filled with the mirror again. He must have been very embarrassed as soon as she left him after the dance. Antonio, meanwhile, thought that our heroine was only pretending to hate him, but was actually secretly in love. The announcement in the hall that fireworks will be coming soon, and everyone who wants to watch them must go to the terrace failed. Rafina met her brothers and was happy because of what they brought. It was whiskey, and the lady was incredibly happy to finally be able to try this drink. The lady tipped her glass of whiskey as if she had just drunk it. They couldn't understand how this happened, and the woman herself recalled how they let her try this drink on her coming of age. In the original, Adrian had a bad tolerance for alcohol, but drinking made him forget everything. Rafina was waiting for her brother and couldn't wait for him to appear. And finally, he walked into the hall. She asked if he had a few minutes to discuss something, and taking his hand, she led him in an unknown direction. The main character began to ask her brother about what kind of girls Jerkin liked, but the guy replied that he didn't even know about it because he wasn't interested in such topics. Our heroine even began to doubt that her brother was really His Majesty, the prince's best friend, because he didn't know such a trivial detail. Zirkin, hearing Rafina's voice, began to worry a lot outside the door. Surprisingly, as soon as he heard her voice, he came straight to her on his own. He made sure that Rafina was still breathing unevenly towards him. Walking through the hall, he felt incredibly hot, just like Rafini. Antonio's mother also appeared at the ball. She was the same one about whom there were rumors. The woman, seeing Her Majesty and the Emperor, was surprised that the couple had become so close. Somehow she managed to get his heart thanks to the poison, and she doesn't need him anymore. She needs all the power that will not allow anyone to treat her the way they did, neither the Emperor nor the Empress, nor even her father. She wants to make absolutely everyone suffer for their actions. Her father and brother greeted her, adding that they were glad to see her because she had finally returned to the capital. Rebecca found it very rude and ill-mannered to call her sister that in public. It seemed as if the Viscount was not at all involved in raising his own son. The husband said that he really raised the children poorly, and Rebecca had no right to point that out. This controversy attracted the attention of everyone around. The woman straightening her hair said that she admits all her previous mistakes, because every child is a reflection of their parents. She angered her father by saying that in the future, she would not study with them and would try to become a good mother. Carl looked into his sister's eyes and saw that she was thinking something. The queen is happy because she is almost at her goal. She needs Antonio to side with her, and thanks to her, he will be the crown prince. Rafina woke up the next day amazingly. There was no hangover at all, and it seemed like she had become a mother. The girl sent Orphan to look for a girl who would suit Zerkan. Rafina ran to her brother. She gave him a letter that he was to give to Zerkan in the future. The guy was scared and didn't know what was in it. The girl added that she had great hopes for him and said goodbye to her brother. His Majesty in the East informed the prince that Adrian had arrived. The guy was scared because his friend didn't warn him about his visit. Adrian wanted to address the prince officially, and yet came to him as a friend. He handed him a letter. It looked like an invitation for a date, which completely surprised the guy. He thought it was incredibly sweet because she still loved him and avoided seeing him. A smile appeared on his face, and when he saw his friend watching, his expression immediately changed to a serious one. Adrian admitted that he is ready to give his blessing and believes that no one but the mirror will make his sister happy. The housekeepers whispered among themselves. They saw how red the crown prince was today. The guy dressed incredibly handsome because he knew he was going on a date. Gathering his thoughts, he decided that it was time to head to the meeting place. Arriving at the meeting place, the man was shocked because Violetta was sitting there. The young man was completely confused. That girl promised to explain everything. Now he learned that Mistress Eston had asked to meet the boy, because according to her, she was perfectly suited to enter into a contractual marriage with him, whatever the conditions. She was ready for anything. The young man became terribly gloomy. He did not understand what had happened. An angry boy visited the Duchy of Aston. At that very moment, Clyde visited Rafina. He came to ask for her hand and heart. Zerkan saw all this. The guy was so angry that he decided not to look into it and just go back to the castle. Amazingly, Rafina was able to politely refuse Clyde, even though she didn't think she would succeed. Suddenly, she was awakened from her sleep by spirits who sensed the coordinates of the relic. The angry heroine said to just tell her the coordinates and calm down. Looking at the map, she saw that 2 relics appeared at once. Now the lady understood why she was so worried. She promised that she would do everything to find the relics. After all, it was for this reason that she told her parents that she was going on a journey in search of the Spirit Stone. The next day, Zerkan was completely in no mood. The prince summoned his friend, believing that if there was a misunderstanding, it would be best to resolve it immediately. To begin with, Zerkan was curious whether Rafina had accepted the guy's proposal, and he also wanted to know what kind of meeting she had arranged for him. After reading the letter, he became even more disappointed because our heroine had left in an unknown direction. The mother said that her daughter went in search of spirit stones and left this morning, leaving a letter and asking her to give it to her husband. Zerkan didn't understand anything because the letter stated that he had 10 dates to find his destiny. The young man looked nervous, saying that he would come to the duchy as soon as the girl visited here. So in fact, he decided to go after Rafina right away. Heading towards the coordinates, our heroine saw that they led straight to a snowy mountain. Surprisingly, Orphan was quite calm. He simply believed that the girl would be able to find his sacred relic. She wanted to really try, because Ruby and Orphan had served her well for 10 years. Although she promised to find the relic, she couldn't believe that it could be such a difficult task. Her hands and feet were frozen. She couldn't feel anything anymore. She wanted to ask the Ruby to take on her own form and warm her, but at the last moment, she changed her mind because she had to find the relics on her own. Meanwhile, Zerkan spoke with his spirits. He wondered what was stronger than the spirit stone. The spirits said that the best thing for weak spirits is a holy relic, and that more powerful representatives of their race don't need it, but the weak can't get anywhere without them. Zerkan said that they immediately set off on a long journey in search of the relic, because most likely Rafina herself was in the same place. He didn't care that there might be great danger there. Moreover, the spirit could deceive her, and then she would be in even greater danger. So he decided to catch up with the girl in any case. Therefore, he ordered his subordinate to declare Rafina wanted outside the capital, and in the meantime, the prince would find out where Rafina was. Our heroine has already suffered a lot, but she has finally reached the top. Orphan immediately found his relic and took on his own form. Rafina began to lose consciousness, but thanks to the help of the bear, she instantly recovered. Orphan, along with Ruby and the girl, is happy that everything worked out. Miraculously, a lake appeared with a holy relic. The orphan thanked her from the bottom of his heart, because thanks to her, he found his relic. As agreed, the spirit grants its power for 5 years as agreed. Rafini was pleased, because Orphan looked incredibly happy. Half the work is done, and now it is necessary to find the ruby relic. Arriving in the east, the girl was shocked by the local flavor. Near this place should be the kingdom of Babylonia. Now she understood how people feel when they are in foreign lands. After the trip, the girl was very hungry, so she decided to try chicken kebab. The ruby relic was also in the water, and thanks to Orphan's powers in it, she will be able to breathe directly underwater. The next morning, she is fully focused and ready. She made the final decision to jump into the water, and until the last moment, she didn't want to do it because it was icy. Orphan immediately warmed her up with his own strength. Thanks to this and breathing underwater, finding the relic will not be a problem. Only the spirit owner could pull out the relic, and the girl succeeded. The two spirits were incredibly happy because they had found what they had been waiting for so long.